On the morning of July 25, 2016, just after sunrise, detectives and crime scene technicians gathered along a quiet stretch of Highway 126 in Oregon. They were following the directions of a suspect already connected to a violent kidnapping, who had led them to an unmarked area of roadside brush. When officers looked down the embankment, about 20 feet below, they found the body of a young woman. The scene itself told a story before any investigation began. This was no accident. Drag marks cut through the dirt, blood stained the rocks, and the ground showed clear signs that her body had been deliberately moved there. Her injuries and the way she was hidden made one thing clear. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover up a violent crime. To understand the gravity of what investigators uncovered that morning, and the fear and sorrow that would soon grip Bend, Oregon, we need to look back at the life of the woman at the bottom of that embankment, Kaylee Anne Sawyer, before she became the center of this tragedy. Kaylee Anne Sawyer was born on March 2, 1993, in Bend, Oregon. She grew up in a large, close-knit family with her parents, Jaime and Juli, and their new partners, and her 4 younger brothers. She is the only girl in the family. Growing up in Bend, with its beautiful natural surroundings, perfectly suited her active lifestyle. She enjoys spending time outdoors, exploring photography, painting, and reading. Her frequent trips to the library showed her strong desire to learn and grow. After graduating from high school, Kaylee began working as a dental assistant at Awbrey Dental. Her co-workers admired her ability to make patients feel comfortable and maintain a friendly, professional environment, always eager to improve herself. She balanced her job with coursework at Central Oregon Community College, managing her time carefully between school and work. Kaylee is also in a happy and committed relationship with her boyfriend, Cameron. They lived together near campus and shared a close circle of family and friends, supporting each other in everything they did. At that point, everything in Kaylee's life seemed positive and stable, with no sign of the tragedy that would soon unfold. Kaylee appeared to be building a bright future, successfully blending her education, career, and relationship. But on Saturday night, July 23, 2016, everything changed. That evening, she met friends downtown in Bend for a bachelorette party. The plan was simple: visit a few bars, enjoy music, and have fun together. She arrived a bit late but quickly joined in, dancing, talking, and enjoying herself. As the night went on, some friends decided to head home, but Kaylee and one other woman stayed out and went to another bar. There, Kaylee dances with a man she doesn't know. One of Cameron's acquaintances saw it and informed him. Cameron then came to the bar. Initially, their conversation was calm, but tension grew during the drive home. What began as a discussion turned into an argument. While disagreements weren't unusual for them, this one felt more intense. When she reached the parking lot in front of the apartment, Cameron advised her to take a walk to calm down before going inside. She got out of the car and walked away. Taking walks to calm down was something Kaylee often did. Cameron returned to their apartment, expecting her to come back soon, but time passed, and she didn't. The last message he received from her said goodbye and mentioned that her phone was turned off. After that, no one heard from Kaylee again. Early on the morning of July 24, 2016, Cameron, growing increasingly anxious, began searching for her himself. He walked through the neighborhood, checked nearby areas, and retraced the routes she usually took when she needed space. He reached out to friends and family, but no one had seen or heard from her. As hours went by with no sign of her, he contacted her family. They immediately knew something was wrong. Kaylee was responsible and always let someone know where she was going. Disappearing without a word was completely unlike her. Their worry deepened when she didn't show up for work at Awbrey Dental later that morning. Missing work without notice was something Kaylee would never do. Attempts to track her phone only further confused things, showing inconsistent locations. One near Eagle Crest, others unrelated to her usual schedule. These false leads frustrated her family and the volunteers who joined the search. After a missing person report was officially filed, Police began investigating. As is standard procedure, they first looked into those closest to her, including Cameron, since he was the last to see her. That night, Cameron's actions and whereabouts were examined in detail. Even Kaylee's family couldn't completely rule out the possibility of his involvement, though they emphasized that nothing in their relationship suggested he could have hurt her. While police gathered initial information, the search remained disorganized and without clear direction. There were no strong leads, no verified sightings, and no clear understanding of what had happened. Then came an unexpected twist. On the morning of July 25, 2016, a woman named Isabel Ponce Lara walked into the Redmond Police Department. Isabel was the wife of Edwin Lara, a campus security officer at Central Oregon Community College. Clearly anxious and distraught, she requested to speak with an officer in private. Isabel explained that her husband had come home the night before and confessed something disturbing. He had hit a girl with his patrol car. When she asked for more details, he only said that the girl's belongings were in their shed, then left the house. This was the first time Edwin Lara's name appeared in connection with the disappearance of Kaylee Anne Sawyer. His supposed confession conflicted with the evidence investigators had gathered so far, but it demanded immediate verification. Police documented Isabel's statement carefully and asked for information about the vehicle involved. Since Edwin's patrol car was owned by the college, investigators prioritized examining it for potential evidence. If the event unfolded as Isabel described, the vehicle itself might hold crucial clues. From that moment, the investigation's focus shifted. What started as a missing persons case now appears to be linked to a serious crime. This raised a troubling question. Could a campus security officer truly hide something so grave? That possibility alone was enough to make the police pay special attention to Isabel's testimony. Despite the lack of hard evidence, this confession, albeit indirect, became the most important clue. Edwin was now at the center of the investigation, linking Kaylee's disappearance to a far more disturbing situation. Based on Isabel's testimony, the police obtained a search warrant for her and Edwin's home. Investigators started with the garage and shed, the places Isabel mentioned. Before long, they found a green duffel bag containing blood traces. Inside were identification, clothing, and personal belongings that were confirmed to belong to Kaylee Anne Sawyer. As the search continued, the findings became increasingly disturbing. In the utility area, the police found blood on the floor. Not just a few small drops, but large smeared stains, indicating signs of dragging or forceful contact. Nearby was a heavy rock with strange markings on its surface. Forensic experts later confirmed the rock was involved in the case, but its presence immediately raised alarms. One item that immediately caught investigators' attention was Edwin's security uniform, found inside his home. The amount and location of the blood was completely inconsistent with a minor accident, especially with the claim of a roadside accident. Officers also found a school project tucked away in a drawer. The project focused on a known serial killer called the Railroad Killer. Although it wasn't direct evidence, it was included in the official report as a detail that added insight into Edwin's psychological state. Overall, the traces in Edwin's home were enough to completely disprove the claim of a traffic accident. The amount and nature of what was found pointed strongly to violence and to a deliberate effort to hide it. When the investigators analyzed the scene, they asked themselves, how carefully had this act been prepared, given that so many traces were concentrated in one place, clearly revealing the picture of the crime. At that point, Edwin's house was no longer merely noteworthy. It had become the very center of the case. It had become central to understanding what really happened the night Kaylee disappeared. The evidence connected Edwin far more directly to the case than investigators had first believed. With those new findings, police hoped to bring him in for questioning right away. But that plan quickly fell apart. By the time his wife Isabel arrived at the Redmond Police Department, Edwin had vanished. He had left the house, taken the family car, and told no one. Not even his wife or his co-workers at Central Oregon Community College, where he worked as a campus security officer. Soon after, police began tracking his movements and saw him heading south. From that moment, Edwin was no longer just a person of interest in Kaylee's disappearance. He appeared to be fleeing responsibility. Alerts went out to the Oregon State Patrol and later into California. As new information came in, investigators realized Kaylee's case might be only the beginning. At the same time, reports along the route indicated that Edwin was behaving unusually, frequently approaching unfamiliar women and clearly showing an intention to evade capture. The next day, after Isabel shared what she knew, Edwin surfaced near Salem. That's where his behavior escalated in a frightening way. He spotted a woman named Andrea Elizabeth Mize as she finished her shift at the Ross Dress for Less store. He approached her and committed the first recorded kidnapping. This action demonstrated that Edwin had gone beyond anything involving Kaylee. He was now a dangerous man, willing to use violence and intimidation to control others. By this point, his actions had become deliberate and patterned, posing a serious danger to anyone who crossed his path. As he continued south, Oregon and California authorities began an urgent collaboration to stop him. After finishing a long double shift, Andrea walked to her car in the Ross Dress for Less parking lot, simply wanting to go home. But as soon as she sat down and closed her door, a man forced his way in with a gun. It was Edwin. Although he was already being pursued by police, Andrea had no idea. He climbed into the passenger seat, aimed the gun, and ordered her to drive, leaving her no way to escape. She complied, and they headed south through Oregon. Edwin said little, but his actions made one thing clear. He intended to keep total control. Andrea remained calm, asking gentle questions, hoping to understand what he planned to do next. For several hours, Edwin kept forcing Andrea to change routes, pulling into parking lots and then merging back onto the highway. Eventually, he chose a low-cost motel and ordered her to go inside with him. Once in the room, the tension grew worse. Edwin took her phone, demanded complete obedience, and told her to stay close, without asking questions. Soon, he began acting aggressively and making advances. Andrea realized that directly resisting could make him violent, so she quickly changed her strategy. She claimed to have medical conditions and warned that harming her could cause serious complications for him. That tactic helped her buy time and somewhat diffuse the situation. Despite the constant threats, Andrea kept thinking of ways to stay safe. She controlled her tone, hid her fear, and tried to appear cooperative. This helped reduce the immediate danger, though Edwin continued switching between violent threats and attempts to assert control. While they were sitting in the hotel room, Edwin suddenly said that he had killed that girl. Andrea didn't know who he meant, but his tone left no doubt that he was serious. Why he revealed this to her at that moment remains unclear. From Edwin's decision to reveal his crime and his demeanor at the time, it was clear that he was not only on the run, but also increasingly out of control. Realizing this, Andrea focused on staying calm, careful, and strategic. Her ability to control her reactions likely helped her survive the hours that followed. The next day, Edwin continued driving south, his behavior becoming more volatile. Andrea was still under his control. Near Northern California, close to a Super 8 motel, Edwin saw an older man, Jack Levy, beside his car. Without warning, Edwin shot him. Jack survived, but this was the first time Edwin used deadly force without provocation, a serious twist in the incident. After the shooting, Edwin abandoned Andrea's car and went to a nearby parking lot, where he found a family, 2 adults and a child, sitting in their vehicle. He held them at gunpoint, forced them out of the car, and then ordered them all to return to their car as he instructed. He eventually released the family unharmed and took their vehicle to continue fleeing. However, Andrea was still held by him. Edwin's behavior grew more unstable. During this time, he recorded a video message that shocked both the public and law enforcement. In it, he described himself as a criminal on the run and called himself a murderer on the loose. The video spread quickly, confirming that Edwin was no longer trying to hide. He was publicizing his crimes and possibly signaling a willingness to keep attacking. Law enforcement agencies across multiple counties began sharing updates in real time, and the public threat level was raised. The situation had shifted from a secret crime to an open, dangerous manhunt. Communities across the region went on alert, Police eventually traced Edwin as he drove south through California. When officers closed in, a high-speed chase began. Then, unexpectedly, Edwin called emergency services himself. During the call, he confessed to killing Kaylee. He told the dispatcher he had a hostage, was armed, and would surrender peacefully if the police ended the chase. He identified himself and asked for a safe way to pull over. The California Highway Patrol in Corning set up a roadblock. As the police approached, Edwin pulled over, threw the weapon out the window, and raised his hands in surrender. The arrest followed standard procedure. Several officers approached at once, removed him from the vehicle, and took him into custody. The second person in the car, Andrea, was safely taken out. However, due to the tense situation, the police initially detained her to verify her role. Once verified as a hostage, Andrea was separated from Edwin and cared for by professionals trained to help trauma victims. At that point, the case reached a critical stage. The suspect had confessed. The hostage was safe, and investigators had a clearer sense of the timeline that began in Bend just days earlier. It's important to note that Edwin's emergency call completely shifted the investigation. His arrest marked a turning point. He was in custody, and detectives could begin verifying his statements and reconstructing what had happened. During his first interview, Edwin gave conflicting accounts. He initially claimed he had accidentally hit a young woman near the college campus, panicked, and tried to cover it up. But when detectives showed him key evidence, Kaylee's green duffel bag, blood traces, a damaged rock, and a uniform with biological material, his story began to change. Confronted with the evidence, Edwin admitted that his encounter with Kaylee wasn't an accident. He confessed to abducting her on the campus, placing her in his patrol car, holding her against her will, and ultimately killing her by strangulation. He described hitting her with a rock and moving her body. According to his account, he hid the body twice, first near the campus, then later moved it to a spot off Highway 126, where it was later found. He also admitted to trying to hide evidence by disposing of clothes, rearranging items, and cleaning blood from a garage and shed. This version of events became the first clear timeline that matched the physical evidence and helped investigators connect each stage of the crime. While Edwin was being questioned, another group arrived at the location he had indicated on the map and discovered Kaylee's body. Forensic results confirmed his final confession and disproved his earlier claim of an accident. When the investigation concluded, Edwin was charged and went to trial for Kaylee's murder. Prosecutors sought the maximum sentence. The defense argued that the confession was coerced, but the physical and detailed evidence were consistent and rejected this argument. The jury found Edwin Lara guilty. A separate trial was held for the kidnapping of Andrea Elizabeth Mize, which included charges of threats, unlawful detention, use of a weapon, and psychological harm. Edwin admitted to his actions but tried to downplay their seriousness. The court rejected his arguments. During the hearings, Kaylee's family spoke about their loss, describing her dreams, her character, and the permanent damage Edwin's actions caused. For them, the verdict represented justice and the assurance that Kaylee's death would not go unanswered. Andrea also testified, sharing her experience of terror and the moments she thought she would not survive. She spoke about her ongoing recovery and the strength it took to face the trauma. Her testimony highlighted both the suffering she endured and her resilience under unimaginable circumstances. The court sentenced Edwin Lara to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the seriousness of his crimes and the continued risk he posed to others. The sentence was based not only on his actions, but also on their lasting impact on public safety and community trust. His crimes deeply affected two families, one that lost a daughter and another that endured a kidnapping. The crime also led to significant changes in school security, leading to a complete overhaul of the training and oversight of security personnel. Edwin Lara's actions devastated lives, shook an entire region, and left lasting wounds. The community is still working to heal. In a quiet town in upstate New York, two men died years apart under eerily similar circumstances. Both were found in their homes. Both had loved and trusted the same woman, and both deaths were ruled accidents, At first, no one questioned it. After all, Stacy Castor seemed like the perfect wife, a devoted mother, hardworking, respectable. But behind that calm, smiling face was a secret so dark it would take nearly a decade to uncover. When investigators finally pieced it together, they realized the horror wasn't just in what she had done to her husbands, but what she had planned for her own daughter. Stacy Ruth Castor was born on July 24, 1967, in the small town of Clay, New York. Those who knew her described her as determined, ambitious, and family-oriented. Even in high school, she dreamed of earning a law degree, working as a paralegal, and eventually opening her own practice, but life took a completely different turn than planned. Near the end of high school, Stacy met Michael Wallace. After their first meeting, she described Michael as the only true love of her life, and the feeling was mutual. From that moment on, Stacy was certain she would marry him. They dated for about 3 years before marrying in 1988. Stacy would later recall those early years as pure happiness. Michael was calm, hardworking, and devoted. He planned a career in mechanics, quickly threw himself into his job. During their marriage, they had 2 daughters, Ashley in 1988 and Bree in 1991. After becoming a mother, Stacy tried to refocus on her career but never earned the degree she had once dreamed of. Nevertheless, she wasn't ready to give up. She found a steady, reasonably paid position as a dispatcher at an ambulance service. While Michael worked as a mechanic at a local garage, both spent long hours away from home. The lack of time together began to take its toll on their relationship. Outsiders often saw the Wallaces as a perfect family, but behind closed doors, Stacy complained more and more about her husband. Michael, who had once enjoyed an occasional drink, began drinking heavily after the birth of their children. He also developed an addiction to banned substances. Many evenings, Stacy came home to find him drunk or passed out, simply going to bed before his next shift. He wasn't violent, but the warmth in their marriage had faded. For a long time, Stacy tolerated the situation. Despite his habits, Michael remained a loving father, and both daughters adored him. Stacy endured the marriage for the sake of the children, but her frustration grew. She often vented to friends, relatives about her disappointment, even began to consider divorce. Besides his drinking, she suspected Michael was being unfaithful. The couple rarely spent time together, and her suspicions deepened, becoming a major reason she thought about leaving him. By 1999, Stacy was ready to consult a divorce lawyer. However, that fall, she changed her mind, telling her family she wanted to give the children one last Christmas together before taking any drastic steps. She planned to move forward with legal action after the new year, but Christmas was not the joyful holiday she had envisioned. That winter, Michael began to feel seriously ill. Late autumn 1990. His health had sharply declined. It started like a mild flu, but within weeks, he was nearly bedridden. Stacy told relatives that she had seen him sit up in bed, vomit, then fall back onto his pillow and sleep for hours. They sought medical help, but doctors struggled to find a diagnosis. Michael complained that he constantly felt drunk, even when he hadn't been drinking, something tests confirmed. His condition puzzled physicians and frightened those around him. By 38, he was too weak to work, speaking and walking with difficulty. On Christmas Day, he mustered the strength to attend a small family gathering organized by Stacy. Everyone noticed how sick he looked, but no one yet knew why. In early January 2000, his doctor examined him again, still without answers. Unaware of the deadly truth behind Michael's mysterious illness, against this backdrop, Stacy decided not to rush into a separation, choosing instead to stand by her husband, at least until his mysterious illness passed. In January 2000, a panicked Stacy dialed 911, reporting that her eldest daughter had found Michael unresponsive on the couch in their living room. Stacy, who claimed to know first aid, said her attempts to revive him had failed. When paramedics arrived, they found 38-year-old Michael Wallace unconscious and beyond help. The coroner later ruled the cause of death as heart failure. His death certificate listed it as a heart attack. However, Michael's family wasn't convinced. They knew he had no history of heart disease and believed something else must have caused his sudden decline. They urged a more thorough autopsy, suspecting that his mysterious illness and his death were connected. But Stacy firmly refused. Insisting that an autopsy wasn't necessary, she quickly accepted the official explanation and arranged the funeral within days. Stacy received a $55,000 life insurance payout following her husband's death. To lift the girls' spirits, she took them on a trip to Disneyland, telling friends and relatives that she was mourning deeply despite the couple's recent troubles. For several years afterward, Stacy lived as a single mother, focusing on work, raising her daughters. That changed when she met her new boss, David Castor. David owned a successful heating, air conditioning company and appeared kind, dependable, and financially stable. He quickly bonded with Stacy's daughters. Their relationship gradually deepened. In August 2003, Stacy and David were married. Both brought children from previous relationships into the marriage. Stacy had Ashley and Bree, while David had a teenage son. The blended family occasionally struggled. David's son didn't get along well with his new stepmother or her daughters, leading to tension in the household. Still, everyone tried to make it work. In August 2005, David planned a trip across the U.S. with his son to repair their strained relationship after a heated argument. The conflict had stemmed largely from the boy's open dislike of Stacy. He had never trusted her and avoided her whenever possible. David wanted to use the trip to mend things, but Stacy strongly objected. Her refusal sparked a fierce, 7-hour argument. According to Stacy, they never reached an agreement. Eventually, David took a bottle of whiskey, retreated to the bedroom, and locked the door. On the morning of August 22, 2005, Stacy called 911, saying she was worried because her husband hadn't come out of his locked bedroom for nearly 2 days and had missed work. She explained that after their small argument, David had taken some alcohol into the bedroom and refused to answer her calls. She feared he might have done something drastic. When officers arrived, they found Stacy waiting outside, visibly distressed. They forced open the locked door and discovered 48-year-old David Castor lying naked, unresponsive on the bed. On the nightstand sat a large glass filled with a green liquid, later confirmed to be antifreeze. Nearby was another glass of half-finished juice, and under the bed lay an overturned, nearly empty bottle of antifreeze with the cap off. At first glance, the scene suggested end his own life. The autopsy confirmed that David had died after ingesting a lethal dose of ethylene glycol, the main chemical in antifreeze. However, experienced detectives immediately noticed inconsistencies. The glass containing antifreeze showed no fingerprints, and the syringe found in the kitchen trash contained traces of the same substance. Investigators found the circumstances suspicious. When questioned, Stacy appeared calm and rational. She claimed she wasn't surprised by her husband's death, explaining that David had been deeply depressed over the recent loss of his father. She said she had begged him to see a doctor, but he refused, insisting he could handle things on his own. To police, her words seemed rehearsed, and soon, they would discover that the truth was far darker than anyone imagined. No one but Stacy supported the end his own life theory. Everyone who truly knew David, including his ex-wife and his son, refused to believe he would ever take his own life. When forensic experts carefully examined the evidence, they found something deeply unsettling. Both the syringe from the kitchen and the glass from David's room contained fingerprints, yet none of them belonged to David. So how could he have possibly drunk the antifreeze himself? Detectives began to wonder if the entire scene had been staged. The supposed method of end his own life itself seemed implausible. If David had truly chosen to end his life, why would he pick such an agonizing way to die? Drinking antifreeze causes an excruciating death, and there had been a loaded gun right under his bed. If he truly wanted to die, there were far easier, quicker, and less painful options available. Moreover, Stacy's fingerprints were discovered on both the syringe in the kitchen and a juice bottle found in David's bedroom. Investigators now suspected she had been poisoning her husband over time, but the question remained, why? It didn't take long for detectives to uncover her motive. Just weeks before David's death, Stacy had pushed for changes to his life insurance policy. His son was removed as a beneficiary, and Stacy was added in his place, giving her a $300,000 reason to see him dead. Despite these glaring inconsistencies, and the medical examiner ultimately ruled the case end his own life. Stacy collected the $300,000 payout soon after, seemingly free of suspicion. At David's funeral, those who attended couldn't help but notice Stacy's demeanor. Her grief felt rehearsed, her composure unnatural, as though she were performing rather than mourning. David's family was furious. His son, in particular, was convinced from day one that his stepmother had darker motives. Yet, with little hard evidence and slow-moving police work, the truth remained buried. Determined to dig deeper, investigators decided to look into Stacy's past, starting with her ex-husband, Michael Wallace. What they found only fueled their suspicions. Michael, too, had died under mysterious circumstances years earlier. And, eerily enough, both of Stacy's husbands were buried side by side. As detectives revisited Michael Wallace's death, they discovered that he had fallen gravely ill without any clear medical explanation. Doctors at the time were baffled. His symptoms appeared suddenly and worsened rapidly. His autopsy listed heart failure as the cause of death, but no toxicology test had been performed. 7 years later, investigators decided to exhume his body. The results were shocking. Traces of antifreeze were found in his system. The discovery finally explained his mysterious symptoms: the confusion, the pain, the gradual organ failure. Ethylene glycol, the main ingredient in antifreeze, can mimic alcohol intoxication before crystallizing inside the body, shutting down the kidneys, liver, and heart. It was a slow and agonizing way to die, just like David's. When police brought Stacy in for questioning again, she showed no surprise that they were investigating her first husband's death. Her calm, almost detached demeanor told detectives everything they needed to know. She wasn't going to confess, but the truth was closing in fast. Stacy denied ever using antifreeze or even knowing what it was. According to her, only Michael, her first husband, had been familiar with the substance because of his work as a mechanic, but detectives were now convinced she had systematically poisoned him, secretly mixing antifreeze into his juice. Despite their suspicions, searches and interviews yielded no solid physical evidence. Without a confession or proof, investigators had no choice but to release her, though she was kept under close surveillance. Stacy likely knew she was being watched, and it made her visibly anxious. Detectives even kept an eye on the cemetery where both of her husbands were buried, but interestingly, she never once visited either grave. Investigators needed more. Their next move was to speak with Stacy's daughters, a decision that clearly rattled her. She became furious when she learned that detectives had questioned her 17-year-old daughter, Ashley. Although the two had been close, Ashley was living on her own, preparing for college in a nearby town, conveniently distant from the police and the media attention surrounding her mother. Then, out of nowhere, Stacy called Ashley one evening and invited her over for a drink. It was unusual. Her mother had never offered her alcohol before. Stacy said she was having a difficult week and simply wanted to relax and talk. Ashley agreed. When she arrived, Stacy poured her a drink herself. After finishing it, Ashley suddenly felt sick and went to bed. She didn't remember much after that, only that she woke up the next day with a pounding headache and a hazy memory of the night before. She didn't suspect anything at first. The symptoms, dizziness, fatigue, confusion, felt like a hangover. Even though she hadn't had any alcohol, what she didn't know was that antifreeze poisoning mimics intoxication in its early stages. The substance is colorless, odorless, and slightly sweet, making it dangerously easy to disguise in a drink. The following day, Stacy offered her daughter another drink, again mixing it herself. This time, Ashley never woke up. On September 13, 2005, Stacy called 911, claiming her daughter was unresponsive. Ashley's younger sister had found her lying motionless in bed, with a bottle of vodka and several prescription pill containers nearby. Next to her was a typed, unpunctuated note. When Ashley finally regained consciousness in the hospital, a detective showed her that note because it was supposedly her confession. In it, Ashley admitted to killing both Michael Wallace and David Castor. It claimed she had poisoned her father with antifreeze and rat poison, later murdered her stepfather the same way. But the moment Ashley saw it, she insisted it was fake. She denied writing it, denied killing anyone. Detectives were skeptical of the note's authenticity too. It was typed, not handwritten, and unsigned, leaving no way to confirm who wrote it. Even without handwriting analysis, something didn't add up. Ashley's symptoms were consistent with antifreeze poisoning, the same method used in both her father's and stepfather's deaths. The last thing she remembered was her mother handing her a drink that tasted oddly sweet. It soon became clear what had really happened. Stacy had tried to poison her own daughter to stage another end one's own life and to frame Ashley for both murders. The plan backfired. Police arrested Stacy Castor on charges of murdering her husband, David Castor, and attempting to murder her daughter, Ashley Wallace. She was taken into custody on her way to visit Ashley in the hospital. Stacy didn't resist. Calm and collected, she simply asked for a lawyer, refused to cooperate. In court, she pleaded not guilty to every charge. Her defense attorney doubled down on this version of events, arguing that Ashley had murdered both men, then ended her own life out of guilt. He even suggested that the police investigation had pushed Ashley over the edge, that she couldn't live with the pressure and wanted to take responsibility in her final moments. But investigators and the public saw through it. To them, it was just another manipulation. One final attempt by Stacy Castor to twist the truth and protect herself, no matter who she destroyed in the process. Ashley was devastated, not only by what her mother had done, but by the sheer cruelty behind it. The realization that her own mother had tried to kill her and frame her for 2 murders was almost impossible to comprehend. It was a betrayal that shattered her completely. Yet Stacy remained composed, determined to prove her innocence. She even went so far as to hire a private investigator to support her defense. But detectives and prosecutors had never seriously believed that Ashley was guilty. The idea that she had murdered her father at the age of 11 simply didn't make sense. Michael Wallace had been a devoted father who deeply loved his daughters. There were no signs of family conflict, no reports of domestic abuse, and no evidence of tension between them. Neighbors described the family as close-knit. Ashley had never shown signs of mental instability or substance abuse. And aside from the strange typed confession letter, there was nothing connecting her to either man's death. The prosecution believed that Stacy had prepared a deadly drink for her daughter, a mixture of vodka and antifreeze, intending to kill her quickly and make it appear as if she had taken her own life. By chance, Ashley survived the poisoning, saved by her younger sister Bree's quick reaction. That twist of fate exposed everything and turned the entire case against Stacy. The trial began in January 2009 and immediately drew national attention. Forensic experts, computer analysts, and family members all took the stand as prosecutors slowly dismantled Stacy's lies. One of the most important breakthroughs came from digital forensics. Linguistic experts analyzed the so-called suicide note, studying the phrasing and structure of the sentences. On Stacy's computer, investigators found several deleted drafts of the same letter, created days before Ashley took her own life. The wording and tone matched Stacy's writing style perfectly. The evidence left no doubt she had written the fake confession herself. Prosecutors argued that Stacy's motives were simple: money and self-preservation. She had killed her husbands for insurance payouts. When the walls began to close in, she attempted to make Ashley the scapegoat. As the trial went on, Stacy's carefully constructed story began to fall apart. Her statements to investigators were full of contradictions. At first, she claimed she hadn't gone into the house before calling 911, but later said she had checked on David and received no response. She told police that she had called home every 30 minutes that morning after learning he hadn't shown up for work. But phone records revealed she'd called only once. In one version, she said she heard him fall and called a friend to help. In another, she claims she left him lying on the floor for hours before getting assistance. Her shifting stories only made her guilt more obvious. Witnesses testified about the family's life, emphasizing how close Ashley had been to her biological father. No one could imagine her harming him. Even so, Stacy's defense attorney clung to the claim that Ashley had suffered from some undiagnosed mental illness that had driven her to kill her father as a child. He pushed for a psychiatric evaluation, insisting that the condition explained her actions, but experts found no trace of any disorder, past or present. Stacy continued to claim she had struggled for years with her daughter's behavior, saying Ashley had always been jealous of her sister and distant from her father. She insisted the girl's mental health had worsened after Michael's death, but prosecutors quickly dismantled these claims, pointing out that Stacy had never taken Ashley to a doctor, never sought counseling, and could not produce a single witness to confirm her story. Teachers, friends, and relatives supported Ashley, confirming that she had always been a kind, responsible, and emotionally stable young woman. Ashley, calm but visibly shaken, testified that her mother's words were lies. She said she had always loved her father and denied ever suffering from mental illness or violent behavior. It became clear to everyone in the courtroom that Ashley wasn't a murderer. She was a survivor, the only living witness to her mother's trail of deceit. During the trial, Ashley took the stand and firmly denied having any part in the deaths of her father and stepfather. Instead, she pointed the finger at her mother. Her younger sister, Awbrey, also believed their mother was guilty. Throughout her daughter's testimonies, Stacy remained emotionless, her face blank, her demeanor cold. The prosecution's most compelling piece of evidence turned out to be a small but damning detail: the misspelling of the word antifreeze in the supposed suicide note. In the letter, it appeared several times as antifreeze. This mistake was no coincidence. Witnesses testified that Stacy herself often pronounced the word that way. To the jury, it became clear Stacy had written the note, not Ashley. The trial lasted 4 weeks. On February 5, 2009, after just 1 day of deliberation, the jury found Stacy Castor guilty of second-degree murder in the death of her husband, David Castor, the attempted second-degree murder of her daughter, Ashley, and perjury. Before sentencing, Ashley addressed the court with a trembling voice. She said she hated her mother, not only for trying to kill her, but also for taking away the 2 men she loved most: her father, Michael Wallace, and her stepfather, David Castor. Both, she said, had been good men who didn't deserve to die such cruel deaths. Stacy was sentenced to 25 years to life for David's murder, another 25 years for the attempted murder of Ashley, and 4 additional years for perjury. All sentences were to be served consecutively. At 41 years old, the punishment effectively guaranteed that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Because of this, prosecutors decided not to pursue charges in the earlier death of Michael Wallace. After the verdict, both Ashley and Awbrey cut all contact with their mother. Stacy was sent to Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York. Despite the overwhelming evidence against her, she never admitted guilt. Her attorneys filed multiple appeals, claiming investigative bias and procedural errors, but all were denied. On June 11, 2016, the woman the media had dubbed the Black Widow was found dead in her prison cell at the age of 48. The cause was determined to be a heart attack. Even in her final days, Stacy maintained her innocence, continuing to insist that Ashley had been the true killer. Her mother also believed her. Stacy Castor's name became infamous, remembered not only for her cold-blooded murders, but for her shocking willingness to sacrifice her own daughter to save herself. December 2024. Olga Lucia Peñuela Bojaca, a resident of a Bogotá suburb and mother of a 13-year-old daughter, met a man who seemed perfect. He trustworthy, attentive, and caring. They moved in together. At first, the relationship seemed smooth, stable. However, Over time, his attentiveness turned into control, demanding complete obedience. When Olga decided to end the relationship, he initially appeared calm, but within a few days, the threats began. One day, he lay in wait and stabbed her multiple times. Her daughter reported that his name was Diego. This is the story of repeated tragedy, of a predator who slipped through legal cracks, and of the devastating consequences of unchecked control, manipulation, violence. Investigators quickly identified the man living with Olga. His real name was Diego Murillo Ramirez, and he had a prior conviction for killing a woman. Records revealed that in 2015, he had been sentenced to 18 years in prison, but was released early on parole for good behavior. He was legally required to check in with a probation officer, but failed to do so for a year and a half. No one noticed this violation. This lapse allowed the killer to remain free without oversight or restrictions. Neighbors recalled Diego as a friendly man who worked at the market and sometimes helped elderly people. No one suspected that someone who had already committed murder was living among them. A journalist covering Olga's killing began searching for similar cases. Among old publications, she found a note from May 2015. Young mother found murdered in Bogota. Suspect, her partner, Diego Murillo Ramirez. The name matched. She sifted through dusty archives, yellowed photographs, copies of records, and newspaper clippings reporting domestic tragedies. In them, she uncovered the story of Tatiana Andrea Grusso Calderon, who had been murdered in her own bed. At the time, reports stated that the killer had turned himself in and claimed self-defense. Tatiana's story began in Bogota. After her parents' divorce, she lived with her mother and grandmother. When she became a mother herself, even before reaching legal adulthood, life forced her to grow up quickly, working, raising a child, and supporting her family. She found a job at a small local shop and brought home every peso she could earn, rarely complaining. Her life was modest but steady. What she longed for most was someone to share the weight she carried. Everything changed in the spring of 2014. One evening, Tatiana went out with a friend to a bar in the southern part of the city. There, she met a man who immediately caught her attention. His name was Diego Murillo. He spoke softly, listened intently, never interrupted. He told her he was a craftsman who traveled the country selling handmade toys and jewelry, accustomed to coldness, indifference. Tatiana saw something different in him, calmness and quiet confidence. Their relationship progressed quickly. Within weeks, Diego was visiting her home and meeting her family. Her mother and grandmother welcomed him warmly, impressed by his politeness, work ethic, willingness to help around the house. Even Tatiana's young son grew attached to him. A couple of months later, Diego suggested that they move in together. Money was tight, so he moved into her grandmother's house. Everything seemed to fall into place. He repaired furniture, brought home groceries, and talked about their future together. Then he proposed a new idea, traveling to local fairs to sell their goods, saying they could earn more that way. Tatiana agreed, and a new chapter began. They went from town to town selling toys, trinkets, and fabrics. To her, it felt like an adventure. For the first time, she felt free, as though she was finally building a life with someone she could rely on. In the early days, Diego appeared attentive and supportive, promising her a peaceful life. Tatiana believed she had found someone who would protect her. He listened, offered advice, and often told her he couldn't live without her. But as time went on, his grip tightened. He didn't want her going out alone. He demanded to know where she was at all times. Jealousy first appeared toward coworkers, then friends, and eventually even her father. Calls with her father, Gustavo Grusso, became rare, and whenever he phoned, Diego was always nearby. Tatiana's replies grew short and cautious, as though she were being monitored. Tatiana's friend Elizabeth noticed she had changed. Tatiana laughed less and stopped spending time with her friends. Whenever Elizabeth expressed concern, Tatiana always had an excuse. as if she were already used to defending Diego. Gradually, Diego isolated Tatiana from her friends and family. He made her delete old photos and close her social media accounts. Every message she received from someone else made him suspicious. He insisted he was doing it all because he loved her and wanted to build trust. Her father, Gustavo, sensed something was wrong. But Tatiana would shut down any conversation that came close to the truth. More than once, he noticed bruises on her arms. She brushed them off as accidents, clumsy falls. Nothing serious. Her mother and grandmother assumed the couple just had ordinary arguments, unaware that something far more dangerous was taking root inside that home. By the summer of 2015, Tatiana could hardly leave the house without his permission. Diego tracked her schedule, checked her phone, and read her messages. Every attempt to push back, even a small one, ended in anger and shouting. The journalist's investigation into Diego revealed a detailed portrait of his past. He was born in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Bogotá. His father was a truck driver. His mother worked in retail. Home life was tense, filled with arguments and resentment. After his parents separated, the instability left deep marks. By the time he reached school age, troubling patterns had already emerged. He defied authority, clashed with teachers, and reacted aggressively to criticism, yet he rarely faced real consequences, always managing to shift blame. After high school, he drifted from job to job, never lasting long anywhere. Co-workers described him as charming, confident, the kind of man who could win people over in seconds. But behind that charm was something colder, a quiet, calculated self-interest. He used his charisma to get what he wanted, and the women in his life were often drawn into that game, offering him shelter, money, or emotional support. The same pattern played out in every relationship. He charmed women with promises of security and affection. He moved fast, winning women over with promises of stability and care. But once he had their trust, he made the rules. Any disagreement was treated as betrayal. His bursts of anger were followed by dramatic apologies. For his partners, it felt like emotional whiplash. For him, it was about control. Psychological evaluations later conducted by experts revealed a disturbing mix of narcissistic and sociopathic traits. He lacked guilt and ignored all boundaries. To him, relationships were a game, and only he got to decide the rules. Empathy was foreign to him. Remorse was replaced by frustration at losing control. According to investigators, reports of violence against women involving this man dated back long before Tatiana's death. Old police records documented complaints from former partners, accusations of threats, humiliation, and physical assault. Each case was dismissed for lack of evidence, often because the women, clinging to hope, refused to testify. No correctional program ever changed his behavior. Each time he was released, he simply changed locations, but not his methods. He would appear somewhere new, charm his way in, gain trust, isolate his partner, and eventually destroy whatever he couldn't control. His actions followed a script, deliberate, patterned, and precise. Each woman became another opportunity to prove that for him, power was the only kind of love that mattered. On May 14, 2015, Tatiana stopped answering her phone. That morning, her mother and grandmother called several times, but the line was disconnected. At first, they weren't alarmed. Perhaps she was busy at work or with her son. But as the evening passed with no word, worry set in. Her grandmother decided to check on her. The front door was locked from the inside. Neighbors said they hadn't seen Tatiana in days, and that the man she lived with had left the previous afternoon. Alarmed, the homeowner used a spare key to enter. Inside, the air was heavy and still, carrying a faint metallic odor. In the bedroom, under a blanket, they found Tatiana's body. The room showed clear signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, broken objects, dark stains on the floor and walls. Police arrived quickly. The investigation showed she had been stabbed many times and also strangled and hit with a blunt object. Experts believe she died 2 or 3 days prior. She had no injuries from trying to defend herself. No one else's DNA was found on her body. Only her own blood was present. The attack was quick and brutal, giving her no opportunity to fight back. Diego had disappeared. He was not at work. His phone was off, and some of his belongings were missing. Investigators eventually found him near Bogota, where his parents lived. When the police caught up with him, he surrendered calmly, insisting he hadn't meant to kill her. He claimed they had argued, that Tatiana had attacked him with a knife, that he acted in self-defense. The investigators quickly disproved his story. The crime scene showed no evidence of a two-sided fight. The angle and direction of the wounds indicated deliberate, repeated strikes from above. Forensic experts confirmed Tatiana had been pinned by the neck before being strangled and stabbed multiple times. Diego was soon charged with intentional homicide. At the time, Colombian law did not yet classify femicide as a distinct crime, so the case proceeded as aggravated murder. In court, Diego pleaded guilty and requested an expedited trial, a move that automatically reduced his sentence. Prosecutors sought 40 years in prison. The judge imposed only 18. The court cited his confession and what it described as remorse shown toward Tatiana's family. For them, it was a devastating decision. Tatiana's father, Gustavo, condemned the ruling as far too lenient for such brutality. He appealed, but the sentence remained unchanged. Diego was sent to a central district prison, where he served just 6 years before a request for early release was filed by prison officials. In December 2021, he walked out a free man. No ankle monitor. No supervision. No restrictions. The decision to release Diego followed standard procedure. He had completed a prison work program, committed no disciplinary violations, and signed a formal statement of guilt, but no psychological evaluation was ever conducted. Upon release, he was issued temporary identification, instructed to check in monthly with a parole officer, and given the address of the probation office. At first, Diego complied. He attended his check-ins, polite and composed. Then he stopped showing up. The missed appointments were recorded, but the case never reached a courtroom. The probation office, overworked and understaffed, simply lost track of him. Diego moved to Bogota, found work in a small repair shop, selling handcrafted goods, and soon met Olga Lucia, a recently divorced woman in her early 40s, raising a 13-year-old daughter. To her, he presented himself as a man trying to redeem himself, someone who had made mistakes but learned from them. He claimed that his ex-partner had attacked him and that he had only defended himself. Olga believed him. She was drawn to his gentleness, his helpfulness, and the way he seemed genuinely attentive. He never shouted, helped around the house, and showed interest in her daughter. After years of disappointment, Diego appeared to be the stability she'd been searching for. Within weeks, they were dating. Within months, he had a key to her home. At first, he was everything she hoped for. Responsible, supportive, affectionate. He bought groceries, did chores, and talked about a shared future. He said he wanted to live right this time, to build a family. But slowly, the mask began to slip. He started questioning where she went, who she met, why she messaged her ex-husband about their daughter. Each answer only bred new suspicion. His tone shifted. Gentle, one moment, accusatory the next. Sometimes he would vanish into silence for a day, only to return as if nothing had happened. Under that cycle of tension and reconciliation, Olga began to lose herself. She stopped meeting friends. It spent most of her time at home. Her messages, calls centered solely on him. A few months later, Diego suggested moving in permanently. He framed it as an act of care. When he moved in, the control intensified. He monitored her phone calls, demanded explanations, even criticized how she raised her daughter. Neighbors noticed the change. The once lively house grew quiet. Olga stopped greeting people and looked perpetually exhausted. Only her mother, Gloria Bojaca, spoke openly about her concerns. She doesn't trust the new man in Olga's life, but Olga brushes it off. By the fall of 2024, the relationship between Olga and Diego had completely fallen apart. The arguments were constant. Olga finally decided to end it. She told him she no longer wanted to live together and asked him to leave. At first, he appeared calm, but within days, the threats began. He sent angry messages, accused her of cheating, demanded explanations. Soon after, he created fake social media accounts to harass and insult her, warning that he was going to confront her in person. Olga blocked his numbers, changed her privacy settings, and avoided going out alone. But Diego didn't stop. He kept appearing at her building, ringing the bell, and vanishing whenever someone came to the door. On the morning of December 5, 2024, Olga left home to run errands. When she returned, Diego was waiting for her outside. Neighbors later said they saw the two arguing, at first in low voices, then louder. Moments later, a young girl nearby heard Olga scream. Diego pulled out a knife and stabbed her several times. She collapsed on the sidewalk as he dropped the weapon and fled. It was over in seconds. Witnesses immediately called the police and emergency services. Olga was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds were fatal. Her daughter, who was nearby, witnessed the entire scene. The news spread quickly. A man previously convicted of murdering a woman had struck again. Police launched a nationwide search. An arrest warrant was issued for Diego Murillo Ramirez, but despite checkpoints at bus terminals and border crossings, he managed to vanish. Investigators later confirmed the attack was premeditated. In the days before the murder, Diego had bought a knife, watched Olga's home, and created fake online accounts to monitor her. His actions showed careful planning, not a crime of passion. When Gustavo, the father of Diego's first victim, heard the news, he recognized the name immediately. History had repeated itself. Public outrage erupted across Colombia. People demanded answers. How could a man once convicted of killing a woman be allowed to live freely without any supervision? Online forums filled with fury, not only about the brutality of the crime, but about the failures that had made it possible. Commentators, activists, and ordinary citizens called it what it was: a tragedy the system had already rehearsed. For Olga's family, however, none of that noise mattered. 2 days later, her body was released to relatives. The funeral was small and private. No reporters, no cameras, just silence. Her daughter stood by the casket, clutching her mother's photo. Meanwhile, Diego remained on the run. Authorities believed he had already crossed the border. The murder of Olga Lucia Peñuela Bojaca sent shockwaves across Colombia. News outlets didn't just cover the killing, they questioned how the justice system had allowed a known killer to leave prison early, skip parole check-ins, and disappear without consequence. Tatiana's father, Gustavo, found himself reliving his nightmare. Nearly a decade after losing his daughter, he began printing flyers again, this time with two faces side by side, Tatiana and Olga, both marked by the same name beneath them. Police issued an international arrest warrant, coordinating with Interpol. Intelligence reports suggested Diego had fled south, possibly into Brazil or Argentina, where he had old acquaintances. Investigators suspected he was using a new identity and forged documents. People reacted to Olga's death in two ways. Some saw it as a typical domestic tragedy, soon to be forgotten. Others viewed it as evidence of a larger problem, that violence against women in Colombia was not just a personal crime, but a failure of society as a whole. Inside her car, 22-year-old Katy Blovelt smiled for a quick selfie, the last image she would ever take. To anyone passing by, she looked calm, carefree, just another young woman wrapping up an ordinary day. But that peaceful moment hit a storm already closing in. Somewhere nearby, a pair of eyes were watching, eyes that once looked at her with love, now burning with rage. Before the night was over, Katy would vanish without a trace. Her phone would fall silent. Her car would be found abandoned. And the quiet town of Simpsonville would awaken to a horror that defied belief. What unfolded next would uncover a terrifying truth, a love story twisted into obsession, a promise turned into a trap, and a crime so cruel, it would haunt South Carolina for years to come. Kati Bloveld was born on August 8, 1994, in the small town of Mountville, South Carolina. She had a radiant smile that always made the space around her warm and bright. Her brother Brandon and sister Brittany loved her kindness, thoughtfulness, and ability to make others feel appreciated. In her early 20s, Kati dreamed of serving her country and building a meaningful life. That dream took shape when she met John Bloveld, a U.S. Army recruiter known in Simpsonville for his discipline, charm, and leadership. At 26, John was confident, articulate, and carried himself with authority, someone people naturally trusted. When Kati met him at a restaurant near his recruiting office, it felt like destiny. John embodied everything Kati admired: purpose, stability, and pride in service. With his encouragement, she joined the Army in 2015. But just 2 months later, a spinal condition forced her to leave on medical discharge. Returning home discouraged, she leaned on John, who stayed close by her side. Their relationship grew quickly, and within a year, they were married. Police launched a full-scale search, but with each passing hour, hope faded. In the early morning of October 26, 2016, detectives received a call that finally ended the search. Among the regular visitors was 17 years old Hannah Thompson, a student from Hillcrest High School. Investigators later described her as infatuated with John. She followed him everywhere, doted on him, and made no secret of her dislike for Kati. By early 2016, the tension became unbearable. Kati couldn't stand the banned substance, constant party, or the presence of teenagers in her home. She finally moved out. Within weeks, Hannah moved into John's room, seemingly taking Kati's place. From there, things spiraled further. On February 26, 2016, Hannah's father called the police after not seeing his daughter for 2 weeks and voicing concerns about her relationship with John. When officers searched John's home that night, they found Hannah there. John was arrested for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. That same day, Kati filed a domestic violence report. She told police that a month earlier, during an argument, John had pointed a gun at her head. She escaped unharmed but terrified. With her report, John now faced even more serious charges. The Army quickly launched an investigation, removed him from recruiting duties, and suspended his income, striking at the core of his identity and pride. His career was on hold, his reputation in ruins, and his anger grew. Investigators later learned that he blamed Kati for his downfall and openly talked about wanting revenge. Meanwhile, his home became even more chaotic. Teens continued to hang out there without supervision. By October, Kati and John were officially separated. She had obtained a restraining order to keep him away and began reclaiming her peace. Her loved ones noticed the change. She smiled again, talked about her plans, and was slowly healing from the trauma of her marriage. However, beneath the calm exterior, John's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. Investigators later discovered that, in the weeks before Kati's death, he had made some disturbing internet searches on his phone, such as how to sharpen a knife and what to do when his wife died. Those were said not to be random questions, but indications of the deadly plan he had started to form. October 23, 2016, began as a normal Sunday for Kati. She woke up early and went to work at the PetSmart on Woodruff Road in Greenville, a job she loved because she could be around animals all day. Co-workers said she was cheerful as usual that afternoon. Around 2:15 p.m., she clocked out, which was the last time anyone saw her. She was supposed to meet friends later that evening, but never showed up. When her calls and texts went unanswered, her family grew worried. Kati was not the kind of person to vanish or ignore loved ones. By nightfall, her parents reported her missing. Earlier that afternoon, Hannah, the teenage girl who had once lived in Kati's house and was now closely involved with John, had driven him to Woodruff Road. She dropped him off near Kati's workplace. At 4:17 p.m., Kati's phone showed one last activity, a selfie taken in her car. She looked serene and unaware that her estranged husband, John, is nearby, waiting for her. At 5:03 p.m., John called Hannah a minute later. He sent her a Snapchat message, telling her to check out her Snapchat. The message was later deleted, but investigators believe it contained evidence of what had just occurred, something too disturbing to recover. On the outskirts of Simpsonville stood an old, abandoned farmhouse that had been empty for more than 20 years. Locals knew it as a place kids explored for fun. Kati knew it too. She had played there as a child. But that evening, it became the site of her tragedy. Inside the farmhouse, John attacked her. Forensic evidence showed she fought back fiercely, with his DNA found under her fingernails. But he overpowered her. He stabbed her to death, then dragged her body through a small basement window and hid it inside a rectangular concrete box in the basement. A cold, secret tomb. Afterward, he cleaned up, left the farmhouse, and abandoned Kati's car in a parking lot on Whitehorse Road to mislead investigators. Hannah followed in another car, helping him escape. Surveillance footage later confirmed the moment Kati's vehicle was left behind, silent and lifeless. For 2 agonizing days, Kati's loved ones waited and hoped. Her mother, Patricia, it told reporters she felt a heavy sense of dread, as if she already knew something terrible had happened. He stabbed her to death, then dragged her body through a small basement window and hid it inside a rectangular concrete box in the basement. A cold, secret tomb. Afterward, he cleaned up, left the farmhouse, and abandoned Kati's car in a parking lot on Whitehorse Road to mislead investigators. Hannah followed in another car, helping him escape. A mutual friend of both Katie and John, Wayne Ruhr, had gone to the farmhouse to look for her. Inside the basement, Wayne found a horrific scene. He searched the upper floors first, calling Kati's name, then went downstairs. In the old concrete box, he found her. Within a minute, he had called the police. When investigators arrived, the cold basement was filled with a heavy atmosphere. In the center stood the large rectangular concrete box that had sat untouched for decades. Inside was Kati, only 5 feet, 1 inch tall, the tiny little thing, as her mother always called her. When Patricia learned what had happened, her grief was indescribable. She struggled to understand how someone so kind, joyful, and full of life could be taken in such a brutal way. Kati had loved animals, laughter, and simple happiness, and now she was gone. The detectives then focused on the person who was thought to be most affected, Kati's ex-husband, John. From the start, something about him felt off. He was distant, unnervingly calm, and showed no curiosity about where Kati had been found or how she had died. There was no grief, disbelief, or emotion, just detachment and self-focus. Investigators quickly noticed his complete lack of genuine feeling. It seemed John felt nothing. No sadness, remorse, or shock. A week later, during another interview, his coldness hadn't changed. He spoke of Kati as if she were merely a footnote from his past, rather than the woman he once loved. His behavior clearly didn't match that of a grieving ex-husband. Instead, it matched that of someone hiding something dark. When asked if he had gone to the funeral home to see her body, John said yes, and that he had brought Hannah with him. The confession stunned investigators. Not only was it unusual, it also showed a frightening lack of boundaries and insensitivity. Even so, suspicion alone wasn't enough. Detectives needed solid proof before they could arrest him. But before they could act, John made a bold move that turned the case into a years-long manhunt. He fled. He drove off in his red car, taking Hannah, the 17-year-old girl who had idolized him and who had played a role in the chain of events that led to Kati's death. With him, for law enforcement, this was deeply troubling. If John had killed his wife, what might he do to Hannah? By November 18, 2016, investigators had gathered enough evidence to charge him with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. But by then, he was gone, a fugitive. That same day, Hannah's parents reported her missing. The once infatuated high school girl was now on the run, with a suspected killer. Back in Simpsonville, detectives continued piecing together the evidence John had left behind. It revealed a clear pattern of premeditated murder driven by vengeance, control, and rage. His phone records told a story of obsession and careful planning. In addition to searches such as how to sharpen a knife and what to do when one's wife dies, John had also looked up when the police could tap a phone. Between October 18 and November 1, he repeatedly searched for news about himself and Kati, tracking the investigation's progress. But the most incriminating evidence came from his text to Hannah. On the day of the murder, he had messaged her 2 chilling words, saying that she was gone, and then another, that he was going through with that thing. These weren't messages of grief. They were admissions of guilt, sent not to police, but to the person who had helped him escape. Investigators also found John's journal, which revealed his twisted reasoning for the murder. In one entry, he had written that someday he hoped she would understand why he had done it and that the girl had been evil to him. In another, much more direct entry, he had simply written that he had done it. Friends and acquaintances told investigators that John had grown increasingly angry and unstable in the weeks before Kati's death. Some said he believed she had ruined his life. Others described his growing obsession with revenge. There had been plenty of warnings about his violent mindset. Their friends later testified that John had openly talked about wanting to kill his wife. In one disturbing instance, he asked someone if she wanted to go to Charleston so he could do it. He even bragged that he was born to kill good and bad people alike. The most chilling revelation came from several witnesses who said John had offered to share Kati's $100,000 life insurance payout with anyone who helped him murder her. It was clear evidence of calculated, cold-blooded intent. After John disappeared with Hannah, the investigation turned into one of the largest manhunts in South Carolina's history. Detectives traced their movements across the country. Their last confirmed sighting was in Las Cruces, New Mexico, on November 15, 2016. After that point, the trail went cold. Evidence later showed that John and Hannah had wandered around Alabama, Texas, and California, living as a homeless couple. John's military training in survival and combat tactics made him particularly hard to track. He knew how to disappear, erase his traces, and live unnoticed. The most chilling revelation came from several witnesses who said John had offered to share Kati's $100,000 life insurance payout with anyone who helped him murder her. It was clear evidence of calculated, cold-blooded intent. When questioned about John's location, she lied. Hannah claimed he had vanished one morning and that she didn't know where he was. That wasn't true, and it would take years before she admitted it. By 2019, the case remained unsolved, but not forgotten. Meanwhile, Kati's family refused to give up. Her mother, Patricia, became a tireless fighter for justice. Together with activist Tracy Fant and the group Freedom Fighters Upstate South Carolina, Patricia launched the Justice for Kati campaign. Through social media, rallies, and annual memorial events, they kept Kati's memory alive. Their persistence inspired other families of homicide victims and pressured law enforcement to keep the case active. After 6 long years, new momentum developed. In early 2022, a specialized U.S. Marshals Cold and Complex Case Task Force took over the investigation. With fresh resources and advanced technology, they re-examined all leads. And one name kept resurfacing: Hannah Thompson. Investigators discovered that despite her earlier lies, Hannah had secretly maintained contact with John for years. Eventually, she agreed to cooperate and told the marshals everything she knew. Her information led them to Medford, Oregon, where John had been living under a false identity. Ben Klina. Agents placed the residence under surveillance. They watched a man matching John's description come and go, blending quietly into the neighborhood. Their suspicions were confirmed when they spotted a distinctive pirate tattoo on his arm, identical to the one in his 2016 police records. That was the proof they needed. On July 20, 2022, at 4:00 p.m., U.S. Marshals and local police surrounded the Medford home. When they arrested him, John tried to claim he was Ben, but the officers already knew the truth. Shocked, he finally realized his 6 years on the run were over. Inside, police found the woman he had lived with for those 6 years. She was devastated, having known him only as Ben Clean and unaware she had been sharing her life with an accused murderer 3 months later, on October 12, 2022, Hannah Thompson was arrested and charged with 5 felonies, including obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. The girl who had once idolized John would now face accountability and later testify against him. John Blovelt's trial began on September 16, 2024, nearly 8 years after Kadi's murder. The prosecution presented a strong case, and the most powerful moment came when Hannah testified. She told the jury that John had confessed everything, how he killed Kadi, hid her phone in water near the abandoned house, and covered her blood with dirt. The defense argued that police had targeted John too early, pointing to the lack of definitive DNA evidence and inconsistencies in Hannah's story. But the overwhelming evidence, the Google searches, journal entries, and text messages, proved otherwise. John had planned every step, threatened Kati, obsessed over her, and even sought to profit from her death. On September 20, 2024, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found John Blovelt guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nearly a year later, on August 21, 2025, the case took a final unexpected turn. Hannah Thompson, once facing 55 years in prison, accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and concealing a felony, receiving only 3 years of probation. For Kati's family, the outcome was heartbreaking. Patricia described it as both a slap on the wrist and a punch in the gut. Even after the verdict, many questioned whether justice had truly been served. Hannah had helped a murderer escape accountability and yet walked free. Still, Patricia and her supporters take some comfort in knowing that John, Kati's killer, will never be set free. Their fight for justice continues, not only in Kati's name, but for every victim whose story might otherwise be forgotten. On a seemingly ordinary morning, Vanessa Camargo Soares got into her familiar car with her husband she once trusted and her baby, not yet 2 years old, beside her. The 230-kilometer road to Goiânia stretched out before her, as peaceful as any other day, but just a few minutes later, that peace would be shattered by a gunshot. Vanessa would be killed. Who was behind this murder? Was it a stranger or someone she knew and trusted, like her husband? Vanessa Camargo Soares was born in Ipora, Goiás, on December 24, 1988. Her childhood was marked by loss and resilience. When she was just 2 years old, her father passed away, a tragedy that left her mother, Nilva Camargo Soares, to raise 2 daughters on her own. Vanessa's older sister, Bruna, only a year her senior, became both her companion and confidant. The sisters grew up inseparable, helping their mother in every possible way. Nilva worked tirelessly in agriculture, instilling in her daughters a deep respect for hard work and perseverance. Even though life was difficult, she created a loving home that emphasized education. These values shaped Vanessa's personality, motivated her to learn and grow. After completing high school, Vanessa continued her studies at the State University of Goiás, where she earned a degree in biology in 2009. Her passion for learning didn't stop there. She strengthened her professional skills by completing a course in educational technology in 2011. After that, in 2013, she earned a degree in agricultural sciences. This strong foundation helped her find work in both education and environmental fields. Friends and colleagues described her as intelligent, responsible, and deeply kind-hearted, a person whose quiet strength inspired those around her. Her relationship with Horacio Rosendo de Araujo Neto began several years before their marriage. Their romance evolved naturally, from dating to engagement. Vanessa's family saw in Horacio a man who seemed mature, polite, and respectful. They believed he was someone with whom she could build a happy, stable home. To outsiders, Horacio appeared to be an ideal partner. He was soft-spoken, courteous, and attentive in public. never raising his voice or showing disrespect toward Vanessa. He projected the image of a calm, reliable husband. At the time of the tragedy, Horacio was 35 years old. Although Horacio tried to maintain the appearance of a responsible husband and caring father, cracks slowly began to show. Beneath the surface, he was increasingly controlling, dependent on his family, and obsessed with financial concerns. In 2014, Vanessa and Horacio officially married, celebrated warmly by both families. At first, their life together seemed calm and content. In 2015, they welcomed their first child, a boy, who quickly became the joy of their lives. Their relatives often helped care for the baby, creating the image of a close-knit, happy family. In early 2017, Vanessa discovered she was pregnant again, this time with a girl. The news filled her with happiness. Her dream of raising both a son and a daughter was coming true. She had already chosen the name Isis, proudly sharing it with her family and friends. Preparations for the baby's arrival filled their home with excitement. Outwardly, everything seemed perfect. A loving couple with a growing family. But beneath that illusion, tensions were rising. Vanessa had begun to feel suffocated by her father-in-law's interference in their private life, and disagreements between her and Horacio became more frequent. What once appeared to be a harmonious marriage was slowly unraveling under pressure, revealing deeper fractures that would soon lead to tragedy. Vanessa worked for Goya, managing the sales department of a store located in downtown Goiânia. Her responsibilities included overseeing sales, creating employee schedules, monitoring inventory, and reviewing financial reports. She personally handled supplier contracts, daily performance evaluations, and cash management. Although some issues could be addressed remotely through emails or messages, the key decisions were always made in person, and Vanessa bore full responsibility for them. The distance between their home in Iporá and the store in Goiânia was about 230 kilometers, roughly a 4-hour drive. The route was difficult, and due to poor road conditions, every trip had to be carefully planned. They checked the car thoroughly before departure, ensured the gas tank was full, and mapped out rest stops. The child's car seat was always inspected before each journey. The family maintained a strict weekly routine. Every Sunday evening, they packed everything they needed: work documents, clothes, baby supplies, and a small first aid kit. They would leave early Monday morning so Vanessa could reach Goiânia by the time the store opened. The family stayed there until Thursday, returning home to Iporá for the weekend. Pregnancy didn't slow Vanessa down. She managed her workload carefully, delegated responsibilities to the shift supervisor, and scheduled her medical appointments well in advance. She adjusted her schedule to avoid late-night commutes and unnecessary stress. Her husband, Horacio, often helped with logistics, shopping, taking their son to daycare, and running errands. This demanding lifestyle required exceptional discipline. If the weather turned bad, she would reschedule meetings and notify her team. Vanessa always kept the car tidy to save time. She also carefully planned the budget for each trip, including gas, food, and unexpected costs. She managed every detail meticulously. Despite her growing fatigue, Vanessa stayed focused. Her goals were clear: maintain her position, grow professionally, and secure financial stability. A career in the capital offered opportunities that her hometown simply couldn't provide. Her family adapted to this rhythm and supported her determination. Meanwhile, Vanessa and Horacio's marriage, already burdened by the pressures of work and family, began to deteriorate. Disagreements over money, childcare, and household expenses grew into frequent arguments. Vanessa felt that their old ways of managing things no longer worked. Outwardly, they still appeared to be a normal couple, but the tension between them went far beyond ordinary marital conflicts. A major source of stress was Horacio's father, who not only gave advice, but constantly interfered in their private lives. Vanessa found herself having to adjust every decision to align with her father-in-law's opinions, which Horacio treated as absolute truth. Any change, no matter how small, required his father's approval and often led to new arguments. By the spring of 2017, Vanessa was emotionally exhausted. Just 4 months before the tragedy, she confided in close friends about wanting a divorce. She said she and Horacio could no longer agree on essential matters, and her father-in-law's constant meddling had made life unbearable. Her loved ones sympathized, but didn't see the situation as urgent, believing that time would mend things. Around that period, the details emerged that would later prove crucial to the investigation. Vanessa had 2 life insurance policies in her name, one worth 300,000 reals and another for 86,000. At the time, this seemed like a responsible step, part of thoughtful financial planning for a young family. No one could have imagined it would later take on a much darker meaning. Vanessa's frustration continued to grow. Her voice no longer carried weight in family matters. Her boundaries were constantly ignored, and the uncertainty surrounding the birth of her daughter only deepened her anxiety. She tried to create structure to plan finances, divide responsibilities, and set a vision for raising 2 children. But every attempt hit the same wall: her father-in-law's dominance and Horacio's unyielding loyalty to him. Vanessa's loved ones noticed her growing exhaustion but didn't see it as alarming. To them, it seemed like a rough patch in an otherwise ordinary marriage, the kind of crisis that could be resolved. On the evening of July 30, 2017, the house was calm. They had finished packing for the week ahead. Vanessa and Horacio briefly discussed the next day's trip to Goiânia, double-checking the departure time to avoid traffic. Their phones were fully charged. Cash and cards were kept separately. As usual, nothing hinted at trouble. Before going to bed, Vanessa checked on her son. His bottle and snack were prepared in case he woke up at night. Around that period, the details emerged that would later prove crucial to the investigation. Vanessa had 2 life insurance policies in her name, one worth 300,000 reals and another for 86,000. At the time, this seemed like a responsible step, part of thoughtful financial planning for a young family. No one could have imagined it would later take on a much darker meaning. 3 to 4 months pregnant, she was healthy and following all of her doctor's recommendations. She had no complaints that evening. They agreed to sleep early so they could leave at dawn. A blanket and a change of clothes were placed within reach, along with a small backpack containing water, wipes, and essential medicines. Vanessa got into the front seat, fastened her belt, asked her husband which route they should take that morning. At 5:31 a.m., the car pulled out of the driveway. The streets were still quiet. Traffic lights turned quickly, and there was no congestion. They were only minutes away from the main highway. The GPS showed an arrival time perfectly aligned with Vanessa's scheduled morning meetings in Goiânia. Everything appeared perfectly normal. The baby slept soundly in the back seat. Vanessa answered a couple of work messages, then put her phone away. The road was familiar, the weather clear, and visibility good. It was an ordinary morning for a family that prided itself on careful planning. According to Horacio's own account, events took a sudden and horrifying turn. He told investigators that while driving on the highway, their car was intercepted and forced to the roadside by 2 men on a motorcycle. One of them, he claimed, approached the driver's window, hit it with what looked like a gun, and ordered them to stop. Fearing for the lives of his pregnant wife and young son, Horacio said he complied. He alleged that one of the attackers then got behind the wheel of their car, while the other followed on the motorcycle. A few minutes later, according to his statement, Vanessa asked him to stop the vehicle. At that moment, he heard a gunshot. He claimed he didn't see the shooter, but immediately realized, from the sound and what followed, that Vanessa had been hit. The men then fled on the motorcycle, leaving him behind with his injured wife and child, Vanessa lifeless in the passenger seat, while their son, still strapped in his car seat, was unharmed. Around that time, another driver passing by noticed a car parked on the roadside and a man frantically waving for help. The passerby stopped and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived quickly but could only confirm Vanessa's death. She had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the head. There were no other injuries or signs of struggle. Their son was taken into the care of authorities before being released to relatives. Forensic investigators meticulously examined the scene. They photographed every angle, recorded the seating positions, confirmed the presence of the child's safety seat, and created a detailed diagram of the vehicle. The road was briefly closed and blocked off. The official report included the time of the call, when emergency services arrived, the state of the car's interior, and if seat belts were in use. It also mentioned Vanessa's obvious pregnancy. Importantly, no bullets or weapons were discovered at the location. Additionally, there was no evidence that the car was broken into or damaged, which went against Horacio's story. Horacio's first statement was taken right at the scene. Later, at the police station, he repeated the same account, but added that he hadn't seen the attackers' faces. "I couldn't recall their clothing, didn't recognize the make of the motorcycle, and couldn't describe the weapon." He insisted that he had acted under duress and had no choice but to comply. Vanessa was buried in Ivalandia, her hometown in Goiás. At the funeral, Horacio appeared completely devastated. He clung to his mother, repeatedly apologizing and saying he had failed to protect his wife. The family mourned in silence. Avoiding public accusations or speculation, after the funeral, investigators began to methodically verify Horacio's story. The first step was to review traffic cameras, CCTV footage from nearby gas stations and toll points. At the specific time of the alleged attack, only one motorcycle was recorded on that stretch of highway. It was being driven by a single rider, who was later identified and located. His alibi was confirmed. He had nothing to do with the case. No other motorcycles appeared in the footage. The driver who stopped to call an ambulance also provided important details, saying he only saw the car and a man on the side of the road waving for help. No one else was around. When investigators compared the time between the supposed ambush and the arrival of this witness, they found the time far too short for two armed assailants to have escaped undetected. Though not definitive proof, these inconsistencies gravely undermined Horacio's version of events. The family's car was sent for a detailed forensic inspection. No scratches or impact marks were found on the windows or bodywork. No indication that the glass had been struck by a weapon or other hard object. There were no signs of a struggle inside the vehicle. Ballistic analysis showed that the shot had been fired from close range. Speed camera data revealed that the car had been moving at a steady pace at the time of the gunshot, making it highly unlikely that a moving motorcyclist could have fired accurately from the side. Phone records and GPS data further confirmed that only 3 people were in the car: Vanessa, Horacio, and their son. The only emergency call during the crucial period was made by the driver who found them, not by Horacio. Additionally, there was no sign that anyone else was contacted before or after the alleged attack. Investigators then turned their attention to the couple's personal lives. Vanessa's mother, Nilva, and Vanessa's sister, Bruna, told police that a month before the tragedy, Vanessa had spoken about her intention to file for divorce. She complained about her father-in-law's constant interference and the growing tension in the household. Their testimonies sharply contradicted the idyllic image of family life that Horacio had described. Financial records uncovered another disturbing clue. Vanessa had 2 life insurance policies in her name, with her husband, sister, and son listed as beneficiaries. One policy, in particular, offered a significantly higher payout in the case of violent death, a detail that immediately caught investigators' attention as a potential motive. All of this information was compiled into a separate case file. The next step was to resolve one central question: could the gunshot have come from outside the car, Horacio claimed, or had it been fired from within? A crucial breakthrough came from the bloodstain pattern analysis. Experts meticulously examined the interior, the seats, dashboard, and clothing, analyzing the size, shape, and distribution of blood droplets to reconstruct what had happened. The results flatly contradicted Horacio's account. He had claimed he was lying on the ground when the gunshot was fired. Yet microscopic blood spatter was found on his shirt front and sleeves patterns, consistent only with someone standing near the victim at the moment of impact. If he had truly been outside the car or on the ground, those stains could not have appeared in those positions. Even more revealing were the traces found on the driver's seat. From the blood trajectory and angle of projection, forensic specialists determined the precise direction of the shot. The evidence was conclusive. The bullet had been fired from inside the vehicle, from the driver's side, at close range. The shooter had been no stranger. It was Horacio himself. This discovery shattered his version of events and marked a decisive turning point in the investigation. What had first appeared to be a random highway murder was now officially treated as a premeditated homicide. Investigators also reconstructed Vanessa's position at the moment of the fatal shot. Her arms and legs were crossed, and her head rested comfortably against the side window, suggesting she had been sleeping. The absence of defensive wounds or any signs of a struggle confirmed that the attack occurred without warning while she was completely relaxed. This effectively ruled out the possibility of an external assault. Special attention was paid to Vanessa's young son, just 21 months old at the time. He was strapped safely into his car seat in the back, but tragically witnessed the murder of his mother at the hands of his father. Silently observing the horrifying event unfold, investigators identified three interrelated motives behind Horacio's crime. The first was financial. He stood to gain significantly from Vanessa's life insurance policies. The second was material. He feared losing assets and custody of the children in the event of a divorce. The third was psychological, a compulsive need for control, manifesting in his refusal to allow Vanessa to make independent decisions, particularly her expressed intent to end the marriage. In its closing arguments, the prosecution painted a clear picture of the crime. The driving forces were greed and the desire to maintain dominance over the family. Experts emphasized that this was not an impulsive act, but a cold-blooded, deliberate murder. One of the most compelling elements of the case was the timeline established through cell phone data and GPS tracking. The report said the vehicle continued moving for about 40 minutes after Vanessa was shot dead. Investigators concluded that during this period, Horacio had the opportunity to dispose of the murder weapon, which was never recovered. Extensive searches of roadsides, drainage, ditch, and nearby bodies of water yielded nothing. Nevertheless, the absence of the weapon did not weaken the prosecution's case. Ballistics experts were able to reconstruct the bullet's trajectory from the wound and microscopic debris inside the car. A search of Horacio's home uncovered ammunition matching the caliber of the bullet recovered at the scene. The shell casings, markings, and lot numbers corresponded to this ammunition type. While a definitive match could not be made without the pistol itself, this evidence further strengthened the case against him. The investigation extended over several years, resulting in a voluminous file of more than 14 separate volumes of documentation. Meanwhile, the court had to resolve custody of Vanessa's young son. Her mother, Nilva, and sister, Bruna, both sought guardianship. Ultimately, the court ruled in favor of Vanessa's family, prioritizing the child's safety and need for stable parenting. The first court hearing took place on November 7, 2020. Due to the global health issues pandemic, the trial was streamed online, allowing local residents to follow the proceedings closely. Jurors were selected by lottery, and both the defense and prosecution had the right to challenge potential jurors before the trial began. The prosecution built a compelling case, drawing on bloodstain pattern analysis, ballistics evidence proving a point-blank shot, absence of forced entry or struggle, detailed records of the car's movements, delayed emergency service notifications, and the suspicious life insurance policies. Taken together, this evidence formed a convincing case of premeditated murder. The defense built its strategy around the claim of an external attack, denying Horacio's involvement in the fatal shooting. The court granted the defense all procedural rights. They were allowed to question expert witnesses, propose alternative theories regarding the bullet's trajectory, and challenge the prosecution's interpretation of the evidence. However, contradictions in Horacio's own testimony, conflicting with the physical evidence, combined with the clear financial motive, completely undermined the defense's credibility. Ultimately, the jury found Horacio guilty on the main charges: the murder of his wife under aggravating circumstances, causing the death of their unborn daughter, and committing the crime in the presence of their son, also considered a statutory aggravating factor. The court sentenced him to 29 years, 6 months, and 20 days in a correctional facility. Reflecting the extreme severity of the crime, the ruling also highlighted that Horacio had attempted to conceal evidence and staged the scene to mislead investigators. The verdict was announced publicly. Vanessa's family received it as a long-awaited act of justice. Shortly afterward, the defense filed an appeal. While the appeal was under review, the court permitted Horacio to remain free. Although the guilty verdict was not overturned, its execution became entangled in procedural delays, postponed hearings, filed motions, and legal challenges. In practice, the residents of Evalandia were confronted with a disturbing reality. A man convicted of murder was still walking freely on the streets. Rumors began to circulate that Horacio had already started a new family and had fathered another child, fueling public outrage, especially among those who had loved and supported Vanessa. Meanwhile, Nilva and Bruna took full responsibility for raising Vanessa's son. They devoted themselves to ensuring his stability, a good education, and emotional protection, shielding him from the traumatic events until he was old enough to comprehend them. However, a key question remained unanswered, one that the legal system couldn't resolve. How could someone found guilty of such a terrible crime still be free? Legal professionals cite Brazil's unique appeals process and constitutional rights that ensure fair treatment, but for the residents of Evalandia, the explanation felt much simpler and far more infuriating. A void, seemingly impossible to bridge divide between what the law says and what feels morally right. The years following the 2020 verdict dragged on in a haze of legal limbo. Horacio's defense team filed motion after motion, citing procedural irregularities, requesting new expert reports, and challenging the admissibility of the evidence. Each filing bought him more time outside prison walls. By early 2022, the Goiás Court of Justice scheduled the first appeal hearing, only to postpone it twice due to the lingering effects of the global health issues and the unavailability of a key forensic witness. Nilva Camargo Soares, now the legal guardian of her grandson, attended every rescheduled date. She sat in the public gallery clutching a small framed photo of Vanessa and Isis, the daughter who never took a breath. In August 2019, while still awaiting trial on the murder charge, Horacio was rearrested during a routine traffic stop. Police discovered a box of .38 caliber ammunition, identical to the round that killed Vanessa, and a pair of handcuffs hidden beneath the spare tire of his pickup truck. The seizure added a new count of illegal possession of restricted munitions to his docket, but a sympathetic judge granted bail within 48 hours. The incident barely registered in the local press, overshadowed by the larger homicide case, yet it hardened the prosecution's portrait of a man who refused to disarm even after taking a life. The appeals process crawled forward. In 2023, a 3-judge panel finally reviewed the original sentence, upholding the conviction but ordering a limited re-examination of the ballistics report. Horacio's lawyers celebrated the minor victory. Nilva wept in the corridor, whispering to Bruna that justice felt like a door that kept slamming shut in their faces. The boy, now 8 years old, had begun to notice the newspaper clippings his grandmother hid in a drawer. He asked why the man in the photographs looked so much like the father he barely remembered. Nilva answered with hugs and promises that one day the truth would be gentle enough to tell. Then, on the morning of February 16, 2024, Horacio, 42 and still free on habeas corpus, drove to a small grocery store in downtown Ipará. Nilva was inside, selecting fruit for her grandson's lunchbox. Surveillance cameras captured the moment Horacio stepped through the automatic door, a .38 revolver glinting in his right hand. He fired 5 times. 4 bullets struck Nilva in the torso and left arm. The 5th shattered a display of canned peaches. Shoppers screamed and dropped to the floor. Nilva, bleeding but conscious, crawled behind a freezer unit and dialed emergency services with trembling fingers. Horacio fled the store, jumped into his truck, and sped toward the city limits. A tactical patrol unit, alerted by the store's silent alarm, intercepted him 3 kilometers away on Geo-60, the same highway where Vanessa had died. According to police radio logs, Horacio rolled down his window, raised the revolver, and fired once at the officers. The response was immediate. 7 rounds from 2 service pistols struck him in the chest and neck. He was pronounced dead at the scene at 10:47 a.m. In the truck's passenger seat lay a handwritten note on lined notebook paper. "I can't take this situation anymore. I'm going to end it all." Survived emergency surgery at Hospital Municipal. Doctors removed 3 bullets and repaired a severed artery in her left arm. She spent 11 days in intensive care, then another month in rehabilitation. During her recovery, she told investigators that Horacio had sent her threatening text messages in the weeks prior, accusing her of turning their grandson against him. The messages, time-stamped and preserved on her phone, were added to the case file as evidence of premeditation in the attempted murder. With Horacio dead, the appeals process collapsed. The Goiás Court of Justice formally closed the homicide file in April 2024, noting that the sentence of 29 years, 6 months, and 20 days could no longer be served. Nilva refused to attend the administrative hearing. Instead, she planted a jacaranda tree in the backyard of the modest house where Vanessa once planned her children's future. Beneath its budding branches, she placed a small marble plaque engraved with 2 names, Vanessa Camargo Suarez and Isis, the daughter who would have turned 7 that spring. It was a quiet night in the hills of Lima when the hum of a moto taxi broke the silence. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, a young woman climbed in, unaware that this short ride would change everything. Hours later, her phone went silent. No messages, no calls, no trace. At home, her mother waited, dinner growing cold on the table. What began as a simple errand to collect a small debt soon unraveled into one of the most shocking cases Villa Maria del Triunfo had ever seen. A story of trust, betrayal, and a mother's relentless pursuit of justice. Mercedes Sanchez Querevalo was born on May 7, 2005, in Lima, Peru. At the time of her death, she was just 19, barely stepping into adulthood, yet already carrying the weight of responsibility. From a young age, Mercedes had learned that strength wasn't a choice, but a necessity. Life hadn't given her many privileges, but she faced every obstacle with quiet determination and unwavering purpose. Those who knew her described her as kind, mature beyond her years, and full of light. A hard-working young woman who rarely complained. No matter how difficult things became, Mercedes was a devoted mother to her 2-year-old daughter, the center of her world. Her days revolved around work at a small liquor store, saving every sol she could for her child's needs. She greeted customers with warmth, remembered familiar faces, and often stayed late to earn a few extra sols. In her limited free time, Mercedes liked to share pieces of her daily life online. On TikTok, she posted clips of herself dancing, joking with friends, cooking, or playing with her daughter. She wasn't famous, but her sincerity drew people in. Her content was simple, real, and full of heart. For her, social media wasn't about chasing likes or fame. It was a small window of expression and connection. Still, money was always tight. She lived with her mother, Angelito Querevalo, and her siblings in Villa Maria del Triunfo, a working-class district in Lima known for its community spirit. Their modest home, built piece by piece over the years, was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of Angelita's cooking. The bond between mother and daughter was unbreakable. They spoke several times a day. Every time Mercedes left home, she texted her mother to let her know where she was and when she'd be back. That's why, on the night she vanished, Angelita immediately sensed something was terribly wrong. On the evening of April 6, 2024, around 9:00 p.m., Mercedes told her mother she was going to meet Esteban Chiche Solo, a 50-year-old moto taxi driver well known to the family. He owed her 220 sols, and she had been asking for weeks for him to pay it back. For Mercedes, that money meant groceries, rent, or clothes for her child. She said it would be a quick meeting, just long enough to collect the debt. Dinner was ready at home. She promised she'd be back within the hour. As time passed, Angelita began to feel uneasy. The food delivery arrived around 10 o'clock p.m., but Mercedes still hadn't returned. Trying to stay calm, she sent her daughter a quick message reminding her that dinner was waiting. 15 minutes later, Mercedes replied, saying she was still busy and would be home soon. That message, so ordinary, so brief, would be the last one anyone ever received from her. When minutes turned into hours, Angelita's unease grew into fear. She called her daughter again and again, but there was no answer. The phone went straight to voicemail. Mercedes always kept her phone on. She was constantly connected, even during work. The silence was unnatural, unsettling, and heavy. By dawn, fear had turned into dread. Deep down, Angelita knew something terrible had happened. The next morning, Angelita went to the nearest police station to file a missing persons report. Every minute felt like an eternity. Soon, Mercedes' photo began circulating across social media and news outlets throughout Peru. Police described her as 63 meters tall, slim, with hazel eyes and light brown hair. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing gray pants, a black t-shirt, white sandals. Authorities provided a hotline number for anyone who might have information. Although the municipality offered some support, the main search effort came from Mercedes' family and friends. They took to social media, flooding Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram with her photo, plea for help. Online communities quickly amplified the case, hoping that someone, somewhere, might recognize her. But as days passed with no news, frustration and despair began to take hold. Angelita turned to the media, accusing the authorities of moving too slowly and mishandling information. She claimed the police not only delayed their response but also spread inaccurate details about her daughter's supposed whereabouts. Feeling abandoned by the system, she decided to take matters into her own hands. The Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations only contacted the family days later. Meanwhile, she reached out to Esteban Chiche Sulo. In the same 50-year-old moto taxi driver her daughter had gone to meet that night. Esteban was no stranger. The family had known him for years. Yet, as Angelita later admitted, there was always something unsettling about him. He was withdrawn and aloof, which never inspired complete trust. When Angelita confronted him, Esteban initially denied everything. He claimed he hadn't seen Mercedes that night, that she never came to meet him. But a few days later, he changed his story. This time, he said he had picked Mercedes up and driven her toward the upper part of Santa Rosa, a remote, poorly lit area of Villa Maria del Triunfo, known for its danger. His sudden change of version made no sense. Mercedes had gone simply to collect a small debt of 220 sols. She had no reason to travel to such a risky, isolated place. The inconsistency alarmed Angelita. Confirming her worst fears, she went back to the National Police with this new information. Officers briefly detained Esteban for questioning, but released him soon after, saying there wasn't yet enough evidence. The family was devastated and outraged by what they saw as official indifference. By then, the story had spread widely through Lima. Neighbors began to pay closer attention to Esteban's behavior. People in his neighborhood had long found him odd. Several times, they had seen him climbing over the wall of a vacant property next to his house. When asked, he calmly explained he was checking on the quails he raised there. A strange but harmless enough excuse. He insisted that the abandoned house belonged to him. But a few days later, the air around that property began to change. A foul, overpowering smell started seeping out, growing stronger by the hour. The stench was unbearable. Concerned neighbors, already aware of Mercedes' disappearance and suspicious of Esteban's erratic behavior, I decided they couldn't stay silent any longer. They called the authorities. In the early hours of Sunday, April 14, police investigators entered the abandoned property next to Esteban's home in Villa Maria del Triunfo, Lima. Following the source of a foul odor, they reached an inner courtyard and uncovered a shallow, makeshift grave covered with dirt. Inside, They found the remains of 19-year-old Mercedes Sanchez. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. Officers immediately detained Esteban at the scene. During questioning by the National Police of Peru, Esteban calmly confessed to the killing, speaking in a detached, matter-of-fact tone that, according to witnesses, betrayed no trace of remorse. In his account, he said that he and Mercedes had met near the Caracol Bridge in Villa Maria del Triunfo. While they were together in his mototaxi, an argument broke out. He claimed the fight escalated and that Mercedes tried to escape. He admitted to striking her hard enough to render her unconscious. Panicking, he took her body back to his home and hid it. Later, Esteban told investigators that he had dismembered Mercedes and disposed of parts of her body before burying the rest in the vacant lot beside his house. He also said that afterward, he cleaned the bathroom where the killing had occurred, apparently in an attempt to remove any trace of what he had done. For Angelita, Mercedes' mother, the confession confirmed her worst fears. After days of searching and pleading for help, she now faced the unthinkable. Her daughter's life had been taken by someone who lived just a few doors away. The case exposed painful flaws in the early police response and left an entire neighborhood questioning how such brutality could come from a man so familiar to them. Above all, it shifted focus back to Mercedes herself, a young woman, a mother, and a TikTok content creator whose gentle spirit and ambitions were cut short in an act of senseless violence. Her death forced many to confront the fragility of safety, how quickly trust can turn to terror, and how invisible danger can lurk within the everyday. After his arrest, Esteban was interrogated again. This time, he admitted to lying to Angelita about her daughter's whereabouts, insisting nonetheless that he had acted alone. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered this was not his first act of violence. Police records revealed previous complaints, including one filed by his own mother for domestic abuse. She described him as aggressive, temperamental, and prone to sudden rage. Violence, it seemed, had long been part of his nature. When questioned, Esteban's relatives expressed their willingness to cooperate with authorities and to seek justice for Mercedes. What disturbed investigators most, however, was his cold and emotionless demeanor. During his confession, he described every step of the crime, from the attack to the dismemberment, with mechanical precision, recalling even minor details without hesitation or remorse. When asked why he had done it, he blamed Mercedes, accusing her of trying to blackmail him without offering a medical diagnosis. Experts identified clear behavioral traits: a lack of empathy, a need for control, and a tendency to dehumanize others. It is likely that Esteban exploited the trust he had built over years of knowing Mercedes and her family. Because he was a familiar face, Mercedes probably didn't view him as a threat when she went to collect the 220 souls he owed her that night. Outwardly, he seemed like an ordinary man, quiet, polite, unremarkable. Yet beneath that facade lay a dangerous imbalance of power. Combined with his history of violence, this imbalance painted a picture of a man projecting his frustrations and resentment onto younger women. Psychologists often note that such offenders direct their anger toward those who symbolize rejection or vulnerability, a dynamic that tragically fits this case. The brutality of Mercedes' murder revealed something far darker than an impulsive outburst. It showed complete dehumanization. Esteban did not see her as a person, but as an object to be controlled and disposed of. His own words made that chillingly clear. He reportedly asked himself, "Where should I throw her?" As if deciding what to do with an unwanted possession. Everything about the act, the dismemberment, the concealment, the calculated cleanup, reflected a profound and terrifying absence of humanity. And yet, it's possible Esteban might never have confessed if neighbors had not reported the foul smell coming from the abandoned house. When Angelita first confronted him, he lied easily, showing no hint of guilt. However, even after his confession, the path to justice was far from straightforward. Despite the discovery of Mercedes Sanchez's remains and Esteban's detailed admission, authorities acted slowly. 2 weeks after the confession, he was close to being released because his initial detention had been recorded technically for banned substances possession, not murder. Prosecutors argued that they lacked sufficient evidence beyond his confession to formally charge him with homicide. The public reacted with outrage. Mercedes's family, supported by activists and the media, launched a campaign demanding accountability and swift justice. In April 2025, under growing pressure, the public ministry, through the Provincial Criminal Prosecutor's Office, finally requested 9 months of preventive detention for Esteban on charges of aggravated homicide. As of today, he remains in custody. The charge against Esteban is now classified as aggravated homicide, reflecting both premeditation and the extreme violence of the act under Article 108 of the Peruvian Penal Code. This carries a potential sentence of up to 35 years in prison. While this is far more fitting than the initial charge for banned substances possession, Mercedes's family remains unsatisfied. Esteban not only admitted to killing Mercedes but also abusing her beforehand. Yet, no formal charge for this violence has been filed. According to Peruvian media, prosecutors are still evaluating whether to add charges like abuse or change the classification of the case to femicide. Considering the brutality of the crime and the dismemberment of Mercedes's body, the autopsy results will be key in determining the precise cause of death, and if abuse assault occurred, these factors are important for classifying the crime correctly and determining the appropriate sentence. Currently, the autopsy results have not been made public. In Peru, femicide is defined under Article 108B of the Penal Code, introduced in 2011 to address rising gender-based violence. This law recognizes when a woman is killed specifically because she is a woman, distinguishing it from ordinary homicide. If Esteban were charged under this statute, his potential sentence could be even harsher. The murder of Mercedes Sanchez occurred amid a troubling rise in gender-based violence in Peru. According to the Ministry of Women and Vulnerable Populations, in just the first few weeks of 2025, at least 17 femicides had already been recorded. Each number represents a life lost and collectively underscores a systemic crisis that continues to claim victims, expose gaps in national institutions. Yet, no formal charge for this violence has been filed. Everything about the act, the dismemberment, the concealment, the calculated cleanup, reflected a profound and terrifying absence of humanity. As of November 2025, the investigation into Mercedes's death is ongoing, and Esteban remains in custody awaiting trial. A formal court date has yet to be set. For those following the case, there is hope that the judicial process will ultimately deliver accountability for the horrific violence committed against her. Melissa Palacios, 21 years old, a bright, beautiful young woman with a future full of promise, vanished into the darkness of San Jorge. Just hours earlier, she had kissed her grandmother goodbye, promised to be careful, and headed to a friend's birthday dinner, an ordinary evening that should have ended in laughter. Instead, it ended in horror. The next morning, villagers collecting firewood stumbled upon a scene so brutal it would shock an entire nation. The body of a young woman, beaten beyond recognition, left to die in silence. What began as a missing person alert would soon unravel into a story of jealousy, betrayal, and power. A story that stretched from the peaceful countryside of Guatemala to the upper corridors of influence. Behind Melissa's gentle smile lay a truth. No one could have imagined she had crossed paths with someone who couldn't accept rejection. Someone who believed that if they couldn't have her, no one would. Melissa Palacios was born on November 15, 1999, into an ordinary family. She grew up in San Jorge, Guatemala, with her mother, Annabella, and her younger sister, Daniela. After Melissa was born, her parents divorced. Although her biological father still provided financial support, it was not enough. So her mother, Annabella, had to work long hours to support her children. Her work in the police force took up most of Annabella's time, leaving her little time to spend with her daughters. She usually left early in the morning, before they went to school, and returned late at night. Because of this, Melissa and Daniela often stayed with their grandmother, who also lived in San Jorge. Melissa became very close to her grandmother, often helping her with everything, especially when she was sick. She even made sure her grandmother took her medication properly. This showed one of Melissa's most defining qualities, her deep sense of care and attention toward those she loved. She also enjoyed playing soccer and caring for her dogs. Even as a teenager, she wasn't interested in parties or clubs. Seeing how hard her family worked to build a better future, Melissa understood the importance of focusing on her education. Instead of going out with friends, she preferred to stay home, study, and spend time with her family. After finishing high school, Melissa had to choose a career. Despite her love for animals, she decided against becoming a veterinarian, believing it wouldn't offer good financial stability. Instead, she enrolled in the Public Accounting and Auditing program at the University of San Carlos Oriental Center in Guatemala. By mid-2021, at 21 years old, Melissa had earned her degree in auditing and passed her exams, a major accomplishment that made her family very proud. She was eager to start her career, both to support her family and to help her younger sister reach the same success. Melissa had become Daniela's role model, an example of hard work and responsibility. Inspired by her sister, Daniela dedicated herself to her studies, striving to be like her. Everyone believed Melissa had a promising future ahead, not realizing how suddenly it would all change. On July 4, 2021, while Annabella was at work, Melissa had the day off. That morning, she called her mother to ask for permission to attend a dinner celebrating a friend's birthday at a country house on the outskirts of San Jorge. Her mother agreed but emphasized one condition. She could only go if someone took her there and brought her back. Because the road was long and unsafe at night, Annabella arranged for a friend's brother to drive Melissa to the party around 2:00 p.m. At 1:00 p.m., Melissa began getting ready, and before leaving, her grandmother blessed her and kissed her goodbye. It would be the last time her family saw her healthy and safe. Around 2:30 p.m., Melissa texted a friend saying she was on her way but would be a bit late because she had run into an acquaintance and decided to stay with her for a while. She didn't mention the person's name. About half an hour later, around 3:00 p.m., she sent another message explaining that the car had a flat tire and reassured her friends that she would just be late. The message seemed a little odd, but no one thought much of it at the time, assuming it was just bad luck on the road. Around 5:00 p.m., Melissa's mother, Annabella, called her daughter to check in and find out when she would be coming home. No one answered, which was surprising because Melissa was usually glued to her phone and never ignored calls or messages. After waiting for a while without hearing back, her mother contacted the family hosting the party Melissa was supposed to attend. She panicked when she learned that her daughter had never arrived, worried and feeling that something was wrong. She believed that something had happened. Melissa would never act like that. If there was a change of plans, she would definitely report it. Despite repeated attempts, her mother was unable to contact her. Fearing the worst, Melissa's mother reached out to her colleagues in law enforcement to act quickly. She requested that they activate the Isabel Claudina Alert, Guatemala's official emergency alert system for missing women. The search began that same evening. The alert system's name honors 2 young women murdered in the early 2000s, cases that once exposed the nation's slow response to disappearances. At that time, the police required families to wait 48 hours before searching, often resulting in tragic delays. Public outrage following those cases led to reforms in the creation of the Isabel Claudina Alert System. On July 5, 2021, a group of men collecting firewood near a dirt road in the village of La Palma made a horrifying discovery. Their dog became agitated and wouldn't calm down. When one of the men went to investigate, he found the body of a woman. Shocked and horrified, he immediately called the authorities. Fearing the worst, Melissa's mother reached out to her colleagues in law enforcement to act quickly. She requested that they activate the Isabel Claudina Alert, Guatemala's official emergency alert system for missing women. Despite an exhaustive search, there was no sign of Melissa, and authorities suspected she had been kidnapped. Her family clung to hope that she would soon be found safe. Not realizing how tragic the outcome would be, her facial bones were deformed, and a blood-covered stone was found nearby. The brutality suggested deep anger or resentment, offering the first clue in the investigation. When Melissa's family was contacted, the description of the victim's clothing matched exactly what Melissa wore to her birthday party that day. Her mother and grandmother later confirmed the victim was Melissa. The coroner's report revealed that Melissa had been strangled for an extended period, as shown by marks on her neck. However, the cause of death was massive head trauma caused by repeated blows from a blunt object. Although there was no evidence of abuse, the brutal nature of the attack suggested a personal motive. Investigators pressed forward, and soon 2 possible suspects emerged. Records from Melissa's phone showed that she had arranged to meet a woman named Maria Fernanda Bonilla Archila on the day she disappeared. Maria, a former classmate of Melissa's, was now a pilot and came from a powerful, wealthy family. For her safety, she was usually accompanied by her personal bodyguard, José Luis Marroquino. Curiously, Maria did not even delete the messages, making her phone a valuable resource for the police. This allowed investigators to quickly pinpoint the location where she and Melissa were supposed to meet. In that area, several shops had security cameras, and witnesses confirmed seeing Maria and José's car picking up Melissa. Police obtained footage from these cameras and confirmed that Melissa and Maria had been in contact on the day of the crime. Cameras along the route allowed police to reconstruct the car's movements, showing the group driving toward a remote area called Rio Hondo. They didn't stop anywhere, suggesting a clear purpose for their trip. Before meeting, Melissa had messaged her friend for the first time that day, and a message about a flat tire arrived just as they reached La Palma, the exact place where her body was later found. This led investigators to believe Melissa had been lured to a secluded location where no one could intervene. The attack likely began right after the message about the flat tire. Since there were no cameras in that remote area, detectives relied on cell phone data, especially geolocation. They wanted to question Maria and José, the last people to see Melissa alive, but both had disappeared from the city. The police received no updates about the pair's whereabouts. The police arrived at Maria's family villa, and neither her parents nor her siblings knew where she and José were. Authorities suspected the family might be hiding them, but lacked proof. The investigation only confirmed that Maria and José disappeared shortly after Melissa's death, reinforcing their suspicions. Melissa's family feared the killers had fled and would escape justice. During the manhunt, the police tried to find a motive for the crime. The medical examiner concluded that the attack was fueled by anger and hatred toward the victim. Usually, such cases stem from long-standing conflicts or personal conflicts, but no one knew of any grudges Melissa had with friends or classmates. Melissa's family said they spoke with Maria shortly after she went missing. They knew Maria and had never noticed any hostility between her and their daughter. Melissa had never mentioned problems with Maria and was usually open with her mother and grandmother. Or so they thought. This made the situation seem suspicious and puzzling. Melissa's mother believed it had all been a misunderstanding. Soon after, police received word that Maria had returned to the city and was spotted at the airport. Officers contacted her immediately. She claimed she hadn't seen Melissa in a long time and that they had stopped communicating well before the tragedy. But Melissa's younger sister, Daniela, told investigators about a recent phone call between them. That call was confirmed through Melissa's phone records, exposing Maria's lie and deepening suspicions. Although Maria initially denied having known Melissa, she later admitted that she and Melissa had spoken frequently, a contradiction in her testimony that alarmed the police. Just hours after the first call, Maria contacted Melissa's family again to ask for news. The next morning, she called again, offering to help with the search and even suggesting the use of a helicopter since she was a pilot. Her actions made it appear as though she cared and wanted to assist. This helped her temporarily gain the family's trust and divert suspicion. However, detectives quickly recognized the behavior as typical of someone trying to monitor an investigation while deflecting blame. At first, while the family was desperately searching for Melissa, Maria seemed just like any concerned friend. But once her lies surfaced, their feelings turned to anger and a demand for justice. Police visited Maria's family's villa several times, but were still unable to arrest Maria and José, who were considered the main perpetrators. The search lasted more than a month. On August 25, 2021, Maria and her bodyguard, Jose, were finally captured. When questioned, Maria justified her absence with professional reasons. She was a pilot, so it was normal for her to be out of town for a few weeks. Meanwhile, the murder case had drawn intense public attention. Rumors spread about Maria, Jose, and their possible connections to Melissa. Initially, people believed that Jose had romantic ties with both women and that jealousy had driven the crime. It was speculated that Jose and Melissa had recently ended a turbulent relationship which might have led to her murder. Witnesses partially supported this idea, but in truth, the tension was between Maria and Melissa. Several witnesses claimed that Maria was infatuated, perhaps even obsessed, with Melissa. Only her close friends know this secret, because she has hidden it from her family. Those who knew Maria believed her feelings were sincere, but Melissa did not reciprocate. She saw Maria only as a friend, which infuriated Maria, who was used to being obeyed. This rejection supposedly filled her with resentment and a desire for revenge. Investigators later concluded that Maria planned the trip to a remote area to kill Melissa. When Melissa resisted, Maria attacked her. Both Maria and Jose were detained, their phones confiscated for evidence. Given the data already recovered from Melissa's phone, investigators expected to uncover even more proof of their guilt. That expectation was correct. Text messages revealed that Maria and Jose had calmly discussed the murder. The day before the murder, Maria said she would lure her friend to a deserted area and beat her to death, and Jose agreed immediately. Although Maria didn't name her intended victim, the context, timing, and location all pointed to Melissa. Additional messages between the two girls confirmed the planned meeting. The most incriminating evidence was an audio recording found on Maria's phone. The recording strongly supported a crime of passion. It appeared that Maria deliberately recorded the murder to relive it later. In the audio, Maria screamed at Melissa, accusing her of gossiping and mentioning another woman named Alida, who, investigators discovered, had since left the country. Alida's involvement remained unclear. That expectation was correct. Text messages revealed that Maria and Jose had calmly discussed the murder. The day before the murder, Maria said she would lure her friend to a deserted area and beat her to death, and Jose agreed immediately. In the recording, Maria demanded that Melissa apologize for online insults. Melissa pleaded for her life, crying and screaming. Maria then ordered her to unlock her phone, promising to spare her if she did, but continued the assault regardless. Melissa's screams stopped, followed by the sounds of heavy blows. She had been stoned to death. Jose's voice was not heard, but evidence suggested he was present. The recording became the prosecution's main piece of evidence. After their arrest, the judge allowed 3 months to gather more evidence. Melissa's family anxiously awaits the trial of the brutally violent couple, anticipating a lengthy prison sentence. However, the case soon took an unexpected turn. In December 2021, Judge Jose Maximino Morales Gonzalez drastically reduced the charges. Maria Fernanda Bonilla Archila, initially accused of premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances, a charge punishable by up to 50 years in prison, was reclassified as having committed manslaughter in the heat of passion, which carried a sentence of only 2 to 8 years. Jose's charge was lowered from murder to complicity. Also reducing his potential sentence, the judge decided to exclude the text message from the evidence, creating a serious setback for the prosecutor's office. Although there was plenty of other evidence, the prosecution had relied heavily on the recording, and losing it severely weakened their case. When Melissa's family found out, they were furious. The outrage quickly spread. Riots erupted outside the courthouse and turned into organized protests led by Melissa's mother. Protesters accused the judge of taking a bribe. It was well known that Maria's family was highly influential in Guatemala. In January 2022, Judge Jose Maximino Morales Gonzalez announced his resignation. By then, his reputation was already tarnished, and the Supreme Court removed his judicial immunity, opening an investigation into his questionable ruling in the Melissa case. After his departure, Judge Sandra Patricia Maia took over. However, the case continued to face delays. During this time, Maria managed to broadcast live from prison on social media, attracting viewers and mocking both her imprisonment and Melissa's family. She confidently claimed that she would soon be released and that her critics would have to accept it. Phones are strictly prohibited in Guatemala prisons. Yet Maria appeared completely unbothered, as if the law did not apply to her. Many suspected that her influential family had bribed officials to ensure her comfort behind bars. Meanwhile, nothing was known about Jose's situation. As he seemed not to enjoy the same protection, eventually, Judge Mejia recused herself, stating that Melissa's family had questioned her impartiality. By April 2022, the case was reassigned to a new judge, Juan José Regalada Rivas. In his first hearing, he denied the Melissa family's request to reinstate the original charge of premeditated murder against Maria and Jose. Months went by with no progress in the case, but Melissa's family refused to give up. They launched a campaign called Justice for the Police, demanding that the case be transferred to a higher court. Their request was initially denied. On May 4, 2024, supporters gathered in San Jorge to show solidarity and demand justice for Melissa. The crowd wore white and purple, Melissa's favorite colors, and carried posters, balloons, photos, and banners. They again appealed to the Supreme Court to move the case to the Capitol, accusing courts and judges of corruption. Melissa's family continued their long battle for justice. In January 2025, after nearly 4 years, the Supreme Court finally granted their petition to transfer the case. The case began to move forward that summer, aided by media coverage and growing public frustration with official corruption. In June, Judge Juan was replaced by Carl Berganza. Maria and Jose were transferred to a prison in the capital. The judge ruled that the crime should be treated as premeditated murder, restoring the original charges. The evidence was re-examined, and it seemed that this time, the perpetrators would not escape justice. Eventually, Judge Mejia recused herself, stating that Melissa's family had questioned her impartiality. By April 2022, the case was reassigned to a new judge, Juan José Regalada Rivas. In his first hearing, he denied the Melissa family's request to reinstate the original charge of premeditated murder against Maria and Jose. They spoke publicly about Melissa's life, her kindness, intelligence, and dedication to her studies, and how her promising future had been stolen. Her mother, grandmother, and younger sister frequently spoke to journalists, keeping her memory alive. They also described the pain of seeing Maria at court hearings, mocking them while wearing a bulletproof vest alongside Jose. This sight deepened their frustration, reminding them how the system had long protected the guilty. The most recent update came in early September 2025. Maria and Jose's defense argued that their rights were violated when the judge refused to consider their third plea to plead guilty to lesser charges of manslaughter and concealment. Instead, the judge held a hearing that reclassified the charges as common murder. Though the trial is still ongoing, Melissa's family celebrates each small victory. Their persistence and unity have brought them closer to holding the two accused accountable. Meanwhile, Maria claims Melissa's mother keeps requesting new judges to delay the case and maintains that she will eventually have her sentence reduced. To the outside world, Shayla Cabrera was an immigrant to the United States, full of hope. She had built a home filled with warmth, laughter, and dreams for her 3 sons, but behind the closed doors of that home lay a much darker truth. Her husband, Josimar Cabrera, was not the caring man he appeared to be. He was violent, controlling, and consumed by blind jealousy. That night, while her children slept peacefully in the next room, Josimar made a horrifying decision. By sunrise, Shayla was gone, her phone silent, her bed empty, her presence erased from the home she had worked so hard to build. Days later, a surveillance camera revealed what had happened. A man dragging a large, heavy bundle through the darkness, calm and methodical, a chilling image that would expose the truth behind her disappearance. What begins as a missing persons report soon becomes one of California's most haunting tragedies, a story of love turned to horror, of hope crushed by cruelty, and of a mother whose dream of safety ended at the hands of the man she once trusted most. When Shayla Cabrera left Peru, she carried the same hope shared by millions who start over far from home. The hope for safety, stability, and opportunity. She wanted to give her children the life she never had. Moving to the United States wasn't just a change of address. It was a leap of faith. She arrived with dreams, courage, and a mother's determination to build a future from nothing. At 33, Shayla had achieved much of what she once imagined. In Lancaster, California, she was known as a devoted mother to 3 boys, August 9, 6, and 4, and as someone who worked tirelessly to provide for them. Friends and neighbors remembered her for her kindness and generosity. Those close to Shayla described her as caring and loyal. She paid attention to every detail, cooking Peruvian food for her children, helping them with their homework, and decorating their Lancaster Avenue apartment with photos, paintings, and bright colors to create a cozy feel. Despite limited resources, she created a space full of laughter and love. But behind that sense of warmth, something darker was happening. Her husband, Jaime Cabrera, appeared to be a loving partner publicly, smiling, playing the role of a father, and projecting the image of a stable family man. Yet behind closed doors, the reality was very different. Even before moving to the United States, Shayla had reported him for abuse in Peru. According to her mother in Lima, Josimar had hit her, mistreated her, and even harmed their youngest child. Those who knew feared for her safety, but she kept much of her suffering private. Like many women in similar situations, she hoped the move abroad might bring change. Sadly, the violence followed her to California. Friends noticed her once bright energy fading, replaced by quiet exhaustion. She continued to smile and help others, but her eyes often seemed distant. One of Shayla's closest friends, Elizabeth Rousseau, later told investigators that she felt trapped. Josimar had threatened to take the children if she ever left, a fear that kept her from escaping. Despite that, Shayla stayed compassionate. She helped neighbors, shared childhood memories from Peru, and often spoke about her dreams for her sons. She wanted them to grow up surrounded by peace and love, free to study, travel, and live their lives without fear. That vision gave her strength even as her situation grew worse. By the summer of 2025, Shayla decided she couldn't endure the abuse any longer. She began to plan her escape carefully, saving money, confiding in trusted friends, and preparing to file for divorce. She also intended to report Josimar to the Lancaster authorities to protect her boys once and for all. On August 9th, she called her parents in Peru to tell them everything. She said she was ready to leave and was going to the police. Her voice reflected both fear and hope. Fear of what might happen if he found out, and hope that she could finally begin again. Her mother remembered that call vividly. It would be the last time she heard her daughter's voice. Inside the apartment, tensions were rising. Josimar could sense what was coming, and the thought of losing control enraged him. Friends later recalled that he had seemed distant and angry in the days before Shayla disappeared. What Shayla didn't know was that he had already made a devastating decision. If he couldn't control her life, he would make sure no one else could. That night, everything changed. August 9th, 2025, was the last day anyone saw Shayla alive. In the early hours of August 10th, while her children slept nearby, something tragic unfolded inside their Lancaster apartment. Prosecutors accused Josimar of murdering his wife, Shayla, in the home they shared with their 3 sons. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office filed a case that included special circumstance allegations. The weapon used in the attack was a knife. According to prosecutors, the act was not spontaneous or driven by rage. It was cold, calculated, and final. That night, their 3 sons slept peacefully, unaware of the horror unfolding nearby. They heard no struggle and saw no violence. In another room, their father, the man who had once vowed to protect them all, was taking their mother's life. The apartment's walls, once filled with laughter and bedtime stories, now held only silence and the weight of unimaginable cruelty. When the violence ended, Josimar faced what came next. The same man who had controlled his wife through fear now sought to control what would happen to her remains. Investigators later described what followed as disturbingly methodical. Josimar wrapped Shayla's body in a large piece of fabric, securing it carefully to hide any evidence of the crime. This piece of cloth later became important evidence, matching the image in the surveillance video that helped solve the case. He moved carefully, not panicking like someone who had just committed a sudden crime, but calmly as if he was carrying out a plan. Some neighbors recalled hearing doors closing, heavy objects being dragged, and cars starting in the early morning. Around 2:40 a.m., a neighbor who worked the night shift returned and saw Josimar wiping down the trunk of a silver sedan. The strange sight in the quiet night caught her attention. Without realizing she was witnessing the cover-up of a crime, hours later, detectives recovered footage from a nearby Ring camera that proved critical. The black and white video, time-stamped 4:00 a.m., showed a figure dragging a large object wrapped in fabric across the pavement. The man struggled with its weight. It was unmistakably Shayla's body. The footage became key evidence, offering undeniable proof of what had happened. Moments later, the man lifted the bundle into the trunk, closed the lid, and drove off. Josimar's route took him out of Lancaster, through dark, winding roads leading into the Angeles National Forest, a vast, remote expanse of cliffs and canyons. During the day, it is a place of beauty. At night, it becomes a refuge for those seeking to hide their crimes. Deep within the forest, hidden from view, Josimar stopped. In the cold early morning air, he opened the trunk and removed the bundle. No one was there to see. He dragged Shayla's body to the edge of a steep slope and pushed it over. It fell among rocks and brush, coming to rest in the darkness below. The woman who had shared his life and home, the mother of his 3 children, was left discarded. When he was done, he returned home. Inside the apartment, his sons were still asleep, unaware that their mother would never wake them again. By morning, Josimar began crafting his next act, deceit. 2 days later, on August 12, 2025, Shayla's friends grew desperate. They had not heard from her since August 9th. No calls, no messages, no social media activity. Nothing. That silence was unlike her. She was always in touch, especially when it came to her children. She would never disappear without telling someone. Worried, her friends went to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department to file a missing person report. Police were sent to Shayla and Josimar's apartment. When Josimar answered the door, he was calm, polite, and even cooperative. But as the detectives began asking questions, his stories began to shift. At first, he claimed that Shayla had been detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It was a deliberate lie, playing on the fear and confusion surrounding immigration. Designed to stall the investigation, when detectives asked for details, he changed his story. Now, he said Shayla had left him for another man. Later, in a third version, he claimed she had been involved in an accident but offered no specifics. No witnesses, no report, no location. Each story contradicted the last. Every new explanation fell apart under even the simplest questioning. Detectives soon realized they weren't speaking to a worried husband. They were speaking to a man trying to hide what he had done. As investigators began to piece things together, friends of Shayla came forward with critical information. They spoke about the years of domestic violence, the countless times she had asked for help, and the fear she lived with daily. They told detectives about her plan to leave her husband and the threats he had made to take the children if she ever tried. The image of a devoted family man that Josimar projected was crumbling, with his story shifting and the friends' testimonies revealing a history of abuse. Investigators understood that this was no longer a simple missing person case. This was a murder investigation in disguise. Detectives began going through every possible clue. They checked phone records, traffic cameras, and security systems in the area around the Lancaster apartment complex. Then on August 13th, just 3 days after Shayla vanished, came the turning point. A neighbor's Ring doorbell camera had captured footage from the early morning hours of August 10th. The video showed Josimar dragging a large object wrapped in fabric across the ground and out of the complex. He struggled with the weight of it before loading it into the trunk of his car. That short clip changed everything. What had begun as a missing person report instantly became a homicide investigation. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Homicide Bureau took charge immediately. Detectives coordinated with specialized search and rescue teams from Crescenta Valley, Altadena, and Montrose. Their task was enormous: to search through over 700,000 acres of the Angeles National Forest, a vast landscape of steep canyons, cliffs, and dense brush. Finding a body there was like looking for a single grain of sand in a desert. But they knew they had to try. Meanwhile, new information made the case even more urgent. Josimar and the couple's 3 young children were now missing as well. Working with both the Mexican and Peruvian consulates, U.S. authorities issued international alerts, fearing he had already fled the country. Leads suggested that he was making his way towards South America. On the morning of August 16, shortly after 10 o'clock a.m., police received the call they both hoped and feared. The Montrose Mountain Search and Rescue Team discovered a suspicious bundle of fabric under a remote slope in the Angeles National Forest. When homicide detectives arrived, they climbed down to the area. Among the rocks and brush, wrapped in the same kind of material seen in the video, they found the body of 33-year-old Shayla Cabrera. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The discovery confirmed what many had feared: the object seen on the surveillance footage was indeed her body. The news spread quickly through Lancaster's Peruvian community. Candlelight vigils began forming almost immediately. People brought flowers, photos, and handwritten notes remembering the woman who had come to the United States chasing a dream of safety and a better life for her children. Instead, she had met a violent end at the hands of the man she trusted most. That same day, investigators received news from Peru. Shayla and Josimar's 3 children had been found safe and secure. They were alive, but their mother was gone, and their father was now an international fugitive. That evening, dozens gathered outside Lancaster City Hall. Some held candles. Others held signs that read "Justice for Shayla, no more victims." The community grieved together, their faces lit by candlelight, remembering a mother, friend, and neighbor who had sacrificed for others. Meanwhile, far away in Peru, Josimar was on the run, moving through cities and trying to stay ahead of the law. Thanks to technology, cooperation, and relentless efforts, his crimes were soon exposed and he would face justice. After fleeing the United States, Josimar crossed international borders in a desperate attempt to escape. He was detained twice, first in Mexico, then in Peru, both times traveling by land and trying to evade authorities. He was questioned but released each time. At that point, U.S. prosecutors had not yet filed formal charges, leaving foreign governments with no legal authority to hold him. It was a frustrating wait for investigators who already knew he was responsible for Shayla's murder. When Josimar arrived at Jorge Chavez International Airport in Lima, Peruvian authorities were waiting. He was questioned, and his 3 young children were placed into protective custody. However, without formal U.S. charges or an extradition order, the police had no legal grounds to detain him. The man suspected of killing his wife walked free while his children were handed over to child welfare officials. In the following days, the case drew wide attention in both the United States and Peru. Shayla's story spread through social media and news outlets. As many questioned how her suspected killer could remain free, the Peruvian Foreign Ministry, working with U.S. consular officials, quickly acted to ensure the children's safety. Within days, the 3 boys were flown from Lima, connecting through Mexico City before returning to Los Angeles. There, they were reunited with their grandmother, Helga Rotzillo. For Helga, it was a painful reunion. Her grandsons were safe, but her daughter was gone forever. Meanwhile, prosecutors in Los Angeles County were moving quickly. Detectives from the Sheriff's Department's Homicide Bureau collected hundreds of pages of evidence: surveillance footage, witness statements, forensic reports, and records showing Shayla's previous reports of domestic abuse. On August 21, the case file was submitted to the district attorney for review. Later that day, prosecutors announced that Josimar was formally charged with 1 count of murder, with an added allegation of using a knife as a deadly weapon. The next morning, an extradition arrest warrant was issued, and Interpol was notified. An international red notice, a global alert identifying Josimar as a murder suspect, was distributed worldwide. The case became a top priority for both the U.S. Department of Justice and the Peruvian National Police. Reports described an intense manhunt along the Pan American Highway, with agents checking hotels, transportation hubs, and collaborating with Interpol offices in Mexico and the U.S. For nearly 2 weeks, Josimar stayed on the run, but with the red notice active, each move became riskier. His image appeared in international databases, border alerts, and media coverage across 2 countries. Investigators believe the growing pressure left him with no escape. Finally, on August 27, 2025, Josimar surrendered to authorities. He walked into Interpol's headquarters in Lima and turned himself in. Peruvian police released footage showing him in handcuffs, wearing a black shirt with the Interpol logo, flanked by officers as cameras flashed, and he was led away. According to Peruvian officials, he will remain in custody in Lima while extradition proceedings continue. These legal processes can take months, involving diplomatic coordination and court reviews to comply with international law. Once approved, he will be transported back to California to stand trial for the murder of Sheila Cabrera. If found guilty, Josimar Cabrera could face a maximum sentence of 26 years to life in prison. For Sheila's family, the wait for justice continues. After months of fear, searching, and heartbreak, there is finally hope that the man responsible for destroying her life will be held accountable. The pursuit of justice for Sheila Cabrera has begun, a journey driven by a mother's love, her search for peace in a new country, and a community determined to keep her memory alive. The man got down on one knee and proposed to the girl. She smiled, nodded in agreement. It was horrifying that this seemingly happy moment happened just an hour after the bloody violence they had caused. The victim was Philip Nicholson, a young man, naive, innocent, and completely defenseless. The story behind it can make anyone shudder. Isabella Gosling was born in 1995. She grew up in Bournemouth, a coastal resort town in the United Kingdom, the very place where the events of this case unfolded. Very little is publicly known about her childhood. Isabella herself claimed that her mother was extremely cruel. Though these statements were never independently verified, at the age of 7, she was diagnosed with a personality disorder and autism spectrum disorder. Autism spectrum disorder manifests differently in each individual, varying in severity, symptoms, and age of onset. It is a neurodevelopmental condition characterized by pervasive deficits in social interaction and communication, accompanied by restricted interests and repetitive behaviors. Core symptoms include difficulties interacting with others, challenges in perceiving the world as most people do, and behaviors that appear unusual or atypical. Individuals sometimes appear emotionally detached, seemingly uninterested in their surroundings, as if living in an entirely separate inner world. For Isabella, socialization was exceptionally difficult. She struggled to form friendships, leaving her feeling isolated and profoundly lonely. This isolation contributed to a growing sense of anger and resentment. She often lashed out at those around her, pushing people away before they could hurt her. By her teenage years, Isabella had become a manipulative individual, engaging with peers only when she could exploit them for her own gain. She showed no genuine care for anyone, never considered the feelings or problems of others, and lied effortlessly, leaving a trail of chaos behind her, completely indifferent to the consequences. In March 2014, at the age of 19, Isabella met a young man named Philip Nicholson, then 22. From that moment, Philip's life began to take a tragic turn. Philip, who also lives in Bournemouth, is described as a kind and sincere person. He consistently prioritized others' needs above his own. Yet he had his own challenges. Diagnosed with a developmental delay as a child, Philip's emotional, cognitive, and volitional development had progressed more slowly than that of his peers. Skills such as speech, memory, reasoning, and emotional regulation were delayed, meaning he required extra time to reach developmental milestones. This often made him prone to sudden bouts of sadness or, alternatively, moments of extreme excitement. Nevertheless, he experienced a happy and supportive childhood. Philip's grandfather was his closest friend, frequently taking him on small trips to introduce him to the world beyond Bournemouth. Philip was also deeply attached to his parents, growing up trusting, loyal, and consistently seeing the good in others. He was willing to do anything for his family. Yet, this sincerity and vulnerability made him highly susceptible to manipulation. Individuals like Isabella could easily exploit his trusting nature for her own purposes. Just over 20, Philip told his mother that he wanted greater independence. He still lived at home, but felt it was time to move out and live on his own. For his family, aware of his developmental challenges, this transition was difficult to accept. Still, they tried to support him fully, respecting his wishes. Deep down, they worried about how he would manage alone, whether he could handle life's responsibilities, or avoid potential danger. Yet they also understood that sooner or later, he had to be treated as an adult. Philip was determined to grow, become independent, and experience life on his own terms, believing he could not do so while remaining under his parents' care. Soon, Philip moved out of his parents' home into an apartment in Bournemouth. He wasn't yet fully able to manage his life independently, as his condition required regular visits from social workers. Most of the time, Philip was left to his own devices. But social service workers routinely checked in to ensure he paid his bills on time, maintained proper hygiene, I knew how to cook, and remained generally safe. This arrangement continued for several months. Philip kept insisting that he wanted to live completely independently, and that constant oversight from strangers was beginning to frustrate him. Eventually, it was agreed that he was ready to live on his own. Philip's dream had finally come true. Now, more than anything, he wanted to find a girlfriend and experience his first romantic relationship. His parents strongly encouraged this desire. Having grown up in a very close-knit, happy family, Philip hoped to one day create the same kind of bond he had seen between his own parents. He admired them deeply and wanted a relationship like theirs in the future. Initially, his family was somewhat cautious. They knew their son was highly sensitive and worried about how he would cope with potential rejection. At the same time, they understood that Philip was easy to manipulate. So, they tried to teach him how to respond appropriately in various situations, make safe decisions, and pay attention to important cues when interacting with others. Philip even had to pass a practical test to demonstrate he was capable of beginning a romantic relationship on his own, and he passed with flying colors. By then, he was fully prepared to start dating and build his own personal life. After downloading a dating app, Philip began searching for a potential partner and soon encountered Isabella Gosling. On their very first date, 19-year-old Isabella and 22-year-old Philip connected instantly. Both were, in different ways, socially isolated. Each had felt rejected in childhood. That shared sense of loneliness brought them closer together. Isabella confessed that she struggled to interact with strangers and felt safe only with Philip. He was overjoyed. For the first time, everything seemed to be falling into place. He was living independently. Now he had a girlfriend who appeared to understand him. He wanted to spend every free moment with Isabella, care for her, and be the best boyfriend he could be. Deep down, he imagined a future with her, building a family and having children. Philip approached the relationship with genuine, pure intentions. Isabella's intentions, however, were far from innocent. She was not seeking love or a meaningful partnership. From the start, Isabella saw Philip as someone she could exploit for her own purposes. During their first date, she began asking him for money. At first, she borrowed small amounts, never intending to repay them. Soon, she demanded that he purchase gifts and pay for luxuries for her. Philip, trusting by nature and inexperienced in relationships, failed to see anything wrong. After all, Isabella was now his girlfriend. He had been raised to see the good in people and did not recognize the warning signs, genuinely unaware that he was being manipulated. Before long, their relationship became physical. Isabella demanded intimacy multiple times a day. Philip, having no prior experience with women, felt uncomfortable. He did not fully understand concepts like consent or personal boundaries. Isabella, fully aware of his inexperience, pressured him into intimate acts that were unpleasant and distressing. This amounted to abuse. The relentless stress began to take a severe toll on Philip's mental health. He developed extreme anxiety, always anticipating what Isabella might demand next. Her constant aggression and verbal abuse kept him on edge. Philip lived in fear, tiptoeing around their apartment to avoid provoking her anger. Meanwhile, Isabella acted entirely in her own interest, pursuing her pleasure and disregarding his well-being. Because of his developmental challenges and lack of experience with communication and romantic relationships, Philip believed this treatment was normal. He thought it was acceptable in a relationship, assumed Isabella would not intentionally hurt him. This pattern persisted for a long time until Isabella eventually grew bored. The relentless stress began to take a severe toll on Philip's mental health. He developed extreme anxiety, always anticipating what Isabella might demand next. Her constant aggression and verbal abuse kept him on edge. Philip lived in fear, tiptoeing around their apartment to avoid provoking her anger. Meanwhile, Isabella acted entirely in her own interest, pursuing her pleasure and disregarding his well-being. Because of his developmental challenges and lack of experience with communication and romantic relationships, Philip believed this treatment was normal. He thought it was acceptable in a relationship, assumed Isabella would not intentionally hurt him. This pattern persisted for a long time until Isabella eventually grew bored. One day, Isabella grew tired of her relationship and began an affair with Richard Moores, a 25-year-old man who was, in many ways, a male counterpart to her. He was equally cunning, bold, showing little empathy and exploiting others for his own benefit. This shared ruthlessness likely drew them together. Richard had a troubled past. He had been homeless for a period and survived by navigating the harsh realities of street life. He had no idea that Richard posed a serious threat to someone vulnerable like himself, or that Isabella was manipulating the situation to her advantage. As time passed, Richard became increasingly jealous of Philip, yet Isabella constantly reassured him that she was only using Philip for his money and had no real feelings for him. She also convinced Richard that they could both profit from Philip's naivete, a plan they quickly put into action. To gain easier access to Philip's money, Isabella persuaded him to open a joint bank account, arguing that their romantic relationship was akin to marriage. The unsuspecting Philip, thrilled by the idea of building a family, agreed without hesitation. Isabella and Richard began taking out multiple loans in Philip's name, sinking him further into debt. Soon, Philip's family discovered what was happening and tried everything to warn him. They pleaded with him, explaining that Isabella's intentions were harmful, that she was manipulating him, and that he was being exploited. Trusting his parents, Philip initially decided to end the relationship. He told Isabella that he was unhappy with her treatment of him and no longer wanted to continue. Yet, Isabella, a skilled manipulator, refused to accept his decision. She told him bluntly that he could not leave because of their intimate connection. She convinced him it would be unfair and cruel to abandon her. Exploiting his sense of duty, Philip, wanting to protect her, reassured his family that Isabella was his girlfriend, and he wanted to be faithful, take care of her. Emulating his father's fidelity to his mother, from that moment, Philip's emotional and physical health began to decline rapidly. The stress from the relationship took a heavy toll. He became chronically ill, lost weight, stopped eating properly, and neglected his personal hygiene. His hair and beard grew unkempt, and he stopped shaving. He ceased cleaning his apartment, leaving it dirty and unfit for normal living. Eventually, Philip's parents decided to intervene. They saw their son deteriorating before their eyes and knew something had to be done. They held a family meeting and involved social workers. Together, they confronted Philip, tried to make him see the reality of the situation. For the first time, Philip appeared to understand that not everyone in the world was good. He finally recognized that Isabella was not right for him. He resolved to end the relationship. He told Isabella it was over and that they were no longer a couple. Of course, Isabella had no intention of letting go of her living ATM, as she secretly called him. She wielded a weapon against which Philip had no defense. She claimed she was pregnant with his child and insisted they must stay together. Philip was stunned. He had always dreamed of becoming a father and envisioned a close, loving relationship with his own child, just as he had with his parents. Faced with the prospect of a baby, he could not bring himself to leave her. They had to try to be a model family for their future child. Once again, Isabella had him exactly where she wanted him, trapped in the relationship. This charade continued for several months. Philip eagerly anticipated fatherhood, counting down the days until the arrival of his son or daughter, completely unaware that he was being manipulated by Isabella. He was determined to be the perfect partner, ready to pamper her and ensure a smooth pregnancy, yet all of it was part of Isabella's calculated scheme. In truth, there was no child at all. The pregnancy was a complete fabrication, a ploy designed to keep Philip willing to spend money on her under her control. Isabella had carefully crafted this elaborate lie, knowing it was the only way to make him stay. Isabella's deception extended beyond Philip. She was also lying to Richard, who genuinely believed the child was his. He too was completely unaware that the pregnancy was a fabrication. Essentially, she manipulated both men simultaneously, leading each to believe he was the father of the unborn child. Every action was orchestrated to give her complete control over both men. In the spring of 2015, Isabella escalated her manipulations further. She began pitting the two men against each other, deliberately sparking constant arguments. She brazenly flirted with both of them in front of the other, igniting jealousy. Tension. Philip and Richard fought over who loved Isabella more, completely unaware that she harbored no genuine feelings for either of them. Later, Isabella concocted an even more outrageous lie. She told Richard that Philip had assaulted her while she was 4 months pregnant. This was entirely false, as Philip would never have committed such an act. He was devoted to the supposed mother of his child. According to Isabella, Richard had to defend her honor. Believing her, Richard was eager to avenge the fabricated assault. At first, Richard sent Philip threatening text messages, vowing to kill him if he didn't stay away from Isabella. But he soon escalated to direct action. On May 4th, 2015, Philip went on a family vacation. He and his family visited the Harry Potter studios in London, hoping for a joyful day together. The first time in a long while that the whole family had gathered. However, Philip's phone was inundated with threatening messages from Richard all day, leaving him distracted and anxious. Philip's parents noticed that he spent an excessive amount of time on his phone, seemingly uninterested in their company. As the day progressed, Philip grew increasingly irritable. His father finally asked what was wrong and who was messaging him constantly. Philip, however, downplayed the situation, joking it off. His parents suspected something was seriously wrong but hesitated to intervene, wanting to respect his privacy and independence. After all, he was an adult. In reality, Philip was being tormented by Richard all day. Richard sent a relentless stream of vile and threatening messages, warning Philip that he was digging his own grave and repeatedly threatening to send him to the other side. The harassment persisted for days. One afternoon, Philip spotted Richard turning the corner as he walked down the street. It was no coincidence Richard had been lying in wait, intending to attack him in broad daylight. Fortunately, Philip recognized him in time, turned, and fled. He managed to board a bus and escape, but was too terrified to disembark, riding the same route for hours. Overwhelmed by fear, he even wet himself. Unable to bring himself to leave the bus to use the bathroom, eventually, he called his mother and confided in her. She came immediately, taking Philip home and helping him clean up. Now fully aware of the situation, his mother tried once again to convince him that Isabella was exploiting his kindness and that it was time to end the relationship. Philip confronted Isabella, telling her he would help raise the child but no longer wanted to live with her. She refused to let him go, and they spiraled into a volatile on-again, off-again relationship. Despite the constant stress Philip endured, believing he was doing the right thing for the sake of the unborn baby. Isabella showed no remorse for her deception and seemed completely unconcerned by the psychological pressure and stress she was inflicting on Philip. Instead of offering support, she even began sending him messages pretending to be another girl, purely for her own amusement and to torment him further. Isabella posed as Amy and messaged Philip, expressing interest in going on a date. Due to his developmental delay, Philip could not comprehend that someone might create a fake profile. The thought never occurred to him. Despite being loyal to Isabella, he was already weary of her outrageous stories. Seeing a message from another girl, he felt a surge of excitement, elated at the prospect of romantic attention from someone new. Philip saw Amy as a potential escape from the toxic relationship with Isabella. A tiny glimmer of hope sparking in his heart, Philip called the supposed Amy, but it was, of course, Isabella on the other end, disguising her voice beyond recognition. After talking with Amy, he arranged to meet her at a pub. But when Philip arrived, it wasn't Amy who was waiting, it was Isabella, accompanied by Richard. Even then, given his cognitive abilities, Philip did not realize there was no other girl. He assumed his girlfriend and friends were coincidentally at the pub. Though disappointed that Amy never appeared, he did not suspect the deception. Isabella and Richard laughed behind his back, amused at how easily they had fooled him. Worse, they made him buy drinks for them all evening. This scheme repeated. Amy would set up dates but never appear, while Isabella and Richard were always there instead. Each time, Philip suffered more, genuinely believing he was communicating with Amy, but unable to understand why she never showed up. Surprisingly, this was not the end of Isabella and Richard's sinister manipulations. By mid-May 2015, Isabella's supposed due date was approaching. Her fuller figure helped convince both men of her pregnancy. Isabella invited Philip to her apartment under the pretext of a serious conversation. Philip assumed it was about their child and agreed to meet, worried she might need help. But as soon as he entered, he fell into another trap. Isabella and Richard were waiting, took his phone, wallet, and locked the door, cutting off any chance of escape. Isabella accused Philip of assault, demanded an apology, but Philip insisted he was innocent. Despite usually giving in to Isabella, Philip refused to apologize. This angered Isabella, who began yelling, physically attacking him. Then, Richard joined in and became violent. Isabella used a mop and dustpan to strike Philip, causing serious injuries. Philip realized they wouldn't let him leave. He managed to escape by climbing out a window and running home. Without his phone or wallet, he couldn't call for help or take the bus. Once home, his parents, concerned for his safety, after speaking with social workers, they reported the incident to the police. For some reason, law enforcement ignored their report and didn't investigate the case. The tormentors, however, were far from finished. The next encounter with Isabella and Richard would prove even more devastating. Early in the morning on May 26, 2015, Isabella decided to lure Philip to her apartment once again. Fearful after the previous incident, he initially refused. She then employed a despicable trick, claiming that Amy, the girl he had longed to meet, was waiting for him. While any reasonable person might have recognized the deception, Philip did not. Seizing what he thought was a chance to finally meet Amy, he agreed to go. She arranged to meet Philip at a local shopping center. Richard, of course, was there as well. All three were captured by surveillance cameras in the store and on the street. Isabella convinced Philip that Amy was waiting for him at the apartment, so he agreed to go there. Neighbors recalled seeing the young man that day. He looked very agitated, nervous, and scared. Isabella and Richard urged him on, insisting Amy could not wait to meet him, telling him to hurry. As soon as Philip entered the apartment, the door closed behind him. Isabella and Richard pounced on him. Isabella again demanded an apology for the alleged assault, refusing to let him go until he said he was sorry. Philip's refusal gave Richard a reason for a brutal attack. Richard already had a history of arrests for violent crimes and often got into fights. But now he had a noble goal to protect the mother of his future child. It didn't matter whether Richard believed Philip had assaulted Isabella. He simply needed an excuse. He lunged at Philip, and began hitting him with his fists. Isabella watched, egging Richard on, reveling in the idea of two men fighting over her, though in reality, the defenseless Philip lay on the floor while Richard stood over him, delivering blow after blow. Wanting to capture the moment, Isabella pulled out her phone and started recording the savage attack. Her voice could be heard urging Richard to hit harder. She felt no remorse, no sympathy for Philip. She didn't care that this young man had spent a year doing everything to keep her happy and satisfied, giving him love, attention, and money. The video lasted over 10 minutes, during which Philip screamed in agony. The vicious pair kept demanding apologies for the fabricated assault. Even if he had broken down and apologized, it wouldn't have stopped the attack. They didn't need his confession. They needed an excuse to beat a vulnerable, defenseless person. Soon, the situation escalated further. Richard ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and without hesitation began stabbing Philip repeatedly. Philip screamed in pain, but this only fueled his rival's rage. Despite the intensity of the attack, Philip remained conscious. At one point, he turned to Isabella and, looking at the camera with a plea, whispered that he just wanted to remain friends. The defenseless Philip, lying on the floor in a pool of blood, even in his final moments, had the purest intentions. All he wanted was to be friends. All he asked was for them to stop. He had already apologized multiple times for unintentionally offending her, begging to be let go home. But his words went unheard. Isabella and Richard were incapable of empathy. They simply didn't care. When Philip fell silent, too weak to resist, Richard stood over him and continued the torment, saying no one would miss him when he was gone, that he was needed by no one. Isabella ordered her boyfriend to stab Philip one last time, which Richard did. Tragically, this stab wound was fatal, and Philip Nicholson's heart stopped. After committing the horrific act, Isabella continued recording the video. Her and Richard's voices could be heard casually discussing what to do with Philip's body. They came up with a ludicrous plan to stage a suicide, convinced they could get away with it. What Richard and Isabella did next was foolish. They placed the bloodied knife in the kitchen sink, far from Philip's body. Even assuming he had inflicted the wounds on himself, the knife would have been near the body, not in the sink. They didn't attempt to clean up. DNA and fingerprints were everywhere, including on the knife. It was one of the worst attempts to cover up such a heinous crime. Isabella and Richard left the crime scene holding hands, embracing each other. They hopped on a bus and headed to the city, planning to spend a pleasant day together. The crime happened early in the morning, leaving them with the whole day ahead. Upon arriving in the city, just minutes after taking an innocent person's life, Richard got down on one knee and proposed to Isabella. She was thrilled and immediately agreed. The rest of the day, Isabella and Richard planned to celebrate their engagement. They were enjoying their happy ending, unaware that the police were already on their trail. Just minutes after the murder of Philip Nicholson, a call came into the emergency services, most likely from a neighbor who heard the screams. When police arrived at Isabella's apartment, they broke down the door, rushed inside, and saw a horrific scene with the lifeless body of a young man. From the defensive wounds on his hands and the murder weapon lying in the kitchen sink, officers immediately concluded it was a deliberate attack. Investigators also reviewed the building's surveillance footage, seeing Philip, Richard, and Isabella entering Isabella's home early that morning, but only two returned. Richard and Isabella immediately became prime suspects. It didn't take the police long to track them down. Isabella and Richard was arrested just hours after the attack, almost immediately following their bizarre engagement. Richard didn't deny involvement in the murder, confessing to his actions immediately. Isabella, however, had no intention of ruining her life for someone else. Initially, she blamed everything on Richard, her fiancé, to whom she had become engaged only half an hour prior. She claimed Philip had come for a friendly visit, but Richard, out of nowhere, flew into a rage and stabbed him. Isabella said she was too scared to intervene. The police checked her phone and discovered a 17-minute video. The footage clearly showed that, while Richard physically attacked Philip with the knife, ultimately ending his life, Isabella gave instructions from behind the camera, urging him to deliver the final blow. This video was sufficient evidence to charge Isabella Gosling. Unlike Richard, Isabella didn't plead guilty, so she stood trial. During hearings, she spouted complete nonsense. Attempting to justify her actions, Isabella claimed she now saw ghosts and that Philip's spirit had visited her. He was supposedly upset with Richard and absolved Isabella of any blame. Naturally, no one took her absurd claims seriously. During the trial, the fabricated pregnancy story came to light, revealing that Richard had been deceived as well. Isabella Gosling was found guilty of taking Philip Nicholson's life and sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 19 years before eligibility for parole. Richard Moores pleaded guilty, so no trial was held in his case. He received a life sentence with a minimum term of 22 years. Philip's grieving parents criticized the inadequate care provided to their son by social workers and the police. An investigation report revealed numerous shortcomings in the protection and care provided by the agencies involved. The hardest part for the Nicholson family was realizing that their son's tragic death could have been prevented. Isabella and Richard committed a senseless crime, taking the life of a defenseless man. Their motives remain unclear. Isabella and Richard were simply evil, heartless people who enjoyed tormenting the weak. There's no other plausible explanation. Isabella was clearly the mastermind behind the crime. She pitted the two men against each other, fabricating a pregnancy and falsely accusing one of assault. Richard believed these lies, thinking he was defending the honor of the mother of his child. Though this provides no justification for murder, if it weren't for Isabella's intervention, Philip would probably still be alive. The tragic story of Philip Nicholson is a painful reminder of the cruelty that can be hidden behind a mask of charm, of how kindness and trust can sometimes fall prey to evil. Philip, a young man with a pure heart, who only wanted to find love, make friends and build a family, was stripped of everything by calculation and cruelty. Although justice was served, the loss and pain that Philip's family experienced will never go away. This story is also a warning about the need to care for and protect the vulnerable in society, and a testament to the devastating power of manipulation, lies, and greed, reminding us that not everyone has goodness in them.